Naoki, 1. He opened his eyes to a silent room. The pendulum of an antique clock swung soundlessly on the wall, its rhythmic ticking absent in the stillness. Naoki bolted upright, gasping for air as if he'd been submerged underwater. "Where am I?" he muttered, his voice raspy and disoriented. He scanned his surroundings, bewildered. The room was rustic and sparsely furnished, with a single bed pushed against the wall. The bed creaked beneath him as he shifted, the sound amplified in the quiet room. Across from it stood a simple wooden desk, a worn backpack lying haphazardly on top. A faded calendar hung on the adjacent wall, its pages yellowed with age. A wooden cupboard stood in the corner, its paint chipped and peeling. A coal stove and an assortment of cookware cluttered the space beside it, a cast iron skillet resting precariously on top of a stack of mismatched plates. The unfamiliar scene deepened Naoki's confusion. What happened? Wasn't I just working overtime? He ran a hand through his hair, trying to piece together the fragmented memories that swirled in his mind like a chaotic whirlwind. My head. A wave of disjointed images and sensations surged through him, leaving him reeling. Had he transmigrated? After the initial shock subsided, Naoki pieced together the situation. It was true. He had died from exhaustion after 5 straight days of overtime and found himself reincarnated in this world. But this wasn't Earth. It was a world where humans coexisted with extraordinary creatures known as Pokémon. They inhabited every corner of the globe, the skies, the seas, the land. The Pokémon world, Naoki whispered, a mixture of awe and disbelief in his voice. He had played the games and watched the anime, even fantasizing about living in this carefree world where trainers embarked on adventures with their Pokémon. Could he, too, journey through this world like Ash Ketchum, catching Pokémon, battling gym leaders, and unraveling the mysteries of this world? The thought of escaping the daily grind and living life on his own terms thrilled Naoki. He could almost feel the wind in his hair as he imagined himself exploring lush forests, scaling towering mountains, and sailing across vast oceans. But he quickly tempered his excitement, a sense of foreboding settling in his gut. This world wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The person he inhabited was also named Naoki, originally from the Paldea region. He had moved to the Hoenn region with his parents, who tragically passed away from an illness, leaving him orphaned and alone. The original Naoki, disillusioned by their deaths, sold their belongings and drifted aimlessly for years, a wandering soul seeking solace in solitude. Finally, at 20, he returned to his grandfather's abandoned ranch in Paldea, where he lived out his remaining days, his spirit withered and his heart heavy with grief. Despite living in the world of Pokémon, he never caught one, content with a solitary existence devoid of companionship or adventure. Naoki felt a pang of sadness for this life he inherited, a life marked by loss and unfulfilled dreams. He glanced at the clock, its hands indicating it was 2 a.m. His stomach growled, reminding him that the original Naoki hadn't eaten dinner. With a silent apology, he rose from the bed, his joints creaking in protest, and grabbed a pack of instant ramen from the backpack. He stoked the embers in the coal stove, adding a few pieces of firewood to coax a flame back to life. As the water heated, Naoki rummaged through the cupboards and drawers but found nothing but basic seasonings. The ranch had been neglected for years, the fields overgrown with weeds, the once thriving orchard now a tangle of gnarled branches and fallen fruit. He could almost picture the ranch in its prime, vibrant fields of crops, fruit-laden trees, a bustling Pokémon house filled with Miltanks and Wooloos, rows of beehives buzzing with activity, their honeycombs dripping with golden nectar. The water began to boil, its steam fogging up the small window above the sink. Just as Naoki opened the ramen packet, a strange message flashed in his mind, its characters glowing with an ethereal light. Instant ramen, a low-quality food with little nutritional value. Popular among field workers and travelers due to its ease of preparation. Effects unknown. Naoki paused, his curiosity piqued. What was that? He had never experienced anything like it before. He added the noodles to the boiling water, and as they softened, he tossed in the seasoning packet, its artificial aroma filling the air. He wasn't a great cook, but living alone had taught him the basics of survival. As the ramen finished cooking, another message appeared, its text shimmering in his mind's eye. Oversalted instant ramen D- low-level food. Due to excessive salt, it has lost any potential benefits and can only fill the stomach. Consuming too much may cause thirst. Pokémon with a preference for salty flavors may enjoy it. Evaluation. It's bad, but not bad enough to make a Pokémon faint. Naoki's eyes widened. He recognized this. It was like the cooking interface from a mobile game called culinary master, developed by his former company. It was a pay-to-win game disguised as a cooking simulator, where players' dishes granted characters magical abilities and stat boosts based on their rarity, ranging from F to SSS. D was nothing special, but F could even inflict debuffs. Is this my cheat ability? Naoki wondered, a glimmer of hope sparking in his eyes. The mention of Pokémon in the description intrigued him. Could this be his chance to turn his life around, to make a difference in this world? He scooped the noodles into a chipped bowl and took a tentative bite. His taste buds were assaulted by a wave of salt, the flavor overpowering any hint of the ramen's original taste. Naoki grimaced. Yep, definitely too much salt. It was barely edible, but it was the only thing he had. As he forced down the noodles, he pondered this newfound power, his mind racing with possibilities. 0 comments 0 vote. Past events 2. Although he had a rough idea about the effect of the cheat, Naoki had no way to test it out just yet. For one, he didn't have any Pokémon around, and secondly, the original owner was broke. At 3 in the morning, Naoki, having barely managed to fill his stomach, started to ponder his situation. Sure, traveling to this world was exciting, but survival came first, no matter where you were. After washing the dishes, he sat at the desk to go through the original owner's belongings. Being a wandering spirit, the backpack was pretty bare. A few sets of clothes, 3 packs of instant ramen, and a handful of loose change and bills were all that remained. Naoki counted the money, about 2,300 in total. This wouldn't last him a month, let alone fund a Pokémon journey. He sighed, calculating the currency conversion in his head. Man, this is rough. But then, thoughts of those adorable and powerful Pokémon from the anime popped into his head, and Naoki perked up. One step at a time, he told himself. Maybe it was the lack of sleep from his old life, or maybe his body was just exhausted, but as soon as he had a full belly, sleepiness washed over Naoki. He didn't fight it, relishing the thought of a good night's rest without worrying about being late for work or struggling to pay the bills. Tomorrow was a new day. He switched off the lights, lay down on the rickety wooden bed, and was soon fast asleep. The next morning, a knock on the door startled him awake. Naoki's eyes flew open, and he sat up, disoriented for a moment. Then it hit him, he was in another world. He let out a relieved sigh, but the knocking continued. Confused, Naoki ran a hand through his messy hair and opened the door to find an older gentleman wearing a brown vest and a black fedora. The man, who appeared to be in his 60s or 70s, had a warm, friendly smile on his face. Beside him stood a creature that looked like a lizard, standing upright on 2 legs. Its body was a vibrant green, shimmering in the morning light. A tire-like structure adorned its neck, and its sturdy, thick tail swayed gently behind it. Naoki's eyes lit up. He instantly recognized the Pokémon. It was a Cyclizar. The older man spoke. I heard you say yesterday that you'd be staying to take care of the ranch. I figured you might not be familiar with the work, and cleaning it up alone would be a lot, so I brought this little one along to help. Naoki blinked, a memory surfacing in his mind. The original owner of this body had indeed agreed to look after a ranch. Yesterday morning, when the original owner returned to the ranch, he bumped into the kind old mayor. Recognizing him, the mayor greeted him warmly and said, "This is the legacy your grandfather left for you. I knew you'd come back someday, so I've been stopping by to tidy up every now and then. Even though it's been empty for years, the house is still livable. You can stay here without a worry." The original owner thanked him politely. The old mayor smiled and said, "Your grandfather and I were friends in our youth, and I even held you in my arms when you were a baby. This is what your grandfather asked of me before he passed away, to make sure you inherited the ranch." Naoki thought to himself, the mayor must think I came back to run the ranch. With this realization, the current situation made sense, but he was still puzzled about the Cyclizar standing beside the mayor. Looking at the tall, thin young man before him, the mayor couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow and regret. What a poor child. All his relatives are gone, and he's all alone in this world. After seeing his condition yesterday, the mayor had returned home and brought his Cyclizar companion along. One reason was to provide company for the lonely young man, and the other was to have Cyclizar help him manage the ranch. The mayor sighed inwardly and asked gently, "Would you be willing to take care of him?" Naoki was taken aback for a moment before understanding the mayor's intention. He looked at the Cyclizar, who stared back with innocent curiosity. Cyclizar, a dual-type normal and dragon Pokémon, had lived alongside the people of the Paldea region since ancient times. With their gentle nature and sensitivity to cold, they often sought warmth from human body heat by letting people ride on their backs. In this way, Cyclizar also served as a mode of transportation in this particular region. Naoki couldn't find a reason to refuse. After all, he wanted a Pokémon of his own, too. It seemed unlikely that he'd get a starter Pokémon from a local professor and embark on a journey like Ash did in the anime. He didn't have any Pokéballs and couldn't exactly catch wild Pokémon with his bare hands. "Thank you," Naoki said. "I'll take good care of him." Relieved, the mayor beamed. "In that case, I'll leave him in your care. Oh, by the way, it's your first day at the ranch, so you might not be familiar with the work here, right?" Having been accustomed to the 996 work culture in his previous life, Naoki felt a bit out of his depth. "Yeah," he admitted. At that moment, the question that had been on his mind the night before was answered. He had nowhere else to go, and his only knowledge of this world came from the anime he watched and the games he played. Given his current circumstances, staying put seemed like the best course of action. At least he had shelter from the wind and rain. The old mayor smiled and said, "Well then, allow me to show you around the ranch. But if I remember correctly, you left Paldea when you were 10 and moved to Hoenn, right?" "Yes," Naoki replied. The mayor sighed. 10 years have flown by. How time flies. The once prosperous and bustling scenes of the past were still fresh in his mind, but now, all that remained was a deserted and dilapidated ranch. The farmland was overrun with weeds and rocks, and the Pokémon house had been ravaged by time, leaving only a skeletal frame. As they walked through the ranch, the Cyclizar followed obediently, observing the young man with curiosity. Naoki focused on absorbing the mayor's words and didn't notice Cyclizar's attention. Since he had decided to stay and take care of the ranch, he was eager to learn. The mayor's eyes were filled with nostalgia. Everywhere he looked, memories of the past flooded back. The land in front of us is the ranch's farmland. A long time ago, all sorts of crops grew here. In the autumn, the fields would be overflowing with fruit. That house is where the rancher lives. The big box next to it is a shipping container. The daily harvest of crops and moo milk can be stored in it. There's a valley east of the ranch where mostly small, docile Pokémon live. You can go there to gather mountain goods and berries, and then put the things you don't need in the shipping container. Every afternoon at 5 o'clock, someone from town comes to collect the items in the containers and pay you for them. The collected goods are then sent to market by a special courier for sale. When your business thrives in the future, there will be special vehicles coming to transport goods. They'll take the ranch's products to all corners of the Paldea region and sell them to various people. Naoki thought to himself, this sounds like a Pokémon version of Harvest Moon. Fortunately, he had played farming games before and was familiar with the concept, so he quickly grasped the idea. His eye caught an abandoned building surrounded by several large trees and overgrown weeds. "What's that?" he asked curiously. The mayor glanced over with a hint of regret in his eyes. "That's the Pokémon shed on the ranch. Your grandfather once imported over a dozen Miltank from the Johto region and kept them there." He frowned and continued, "After he passed away, your parents sold those Miltank, and this Pokémon shed gradually fell into disrepair. But don't worry. Once you get settled, you can go to the carpentry shop and ask them to help you expand your house and repair the shed. Oh, and by the way, I've placed all the tools you might need for the ranch there for you." The old mayor pointed to the utility room behind the house and explained, "An axe for chopping wood, a hammer for breaking rocks, a hoe for tilling the land, a watering can, a sickle for cutting grass, and a few bags of crop seeds suitable for spring planting. In short, this ranch is all yours. I hope you'll take good care of it and restore this place to its former glory. Your grandfather would be so happy if you could achieve that." Naoki paused for a moment, then nodded. "I'll do my best." Hearing his response, the mayor smiled. "In that case, I won't keep you any longer. I'll leave Cyclizar in your care. He's very strong and will definitely be a great help around the ranch." The Cyclizar chirped happily, grew. The mayor smiled and turned to leave, but before he had taken more than a few steps, he turned back around. "Oh, one more thing," Naoki urged him, "go ahead." The mayor continued, "You can keep the wood and stones you gather with the axe. When you have enough money, you can take them to the carpentry shop and have them help you expand your house and the Pokémon shed. That way, you can save a lot of money on materials." Naoki made a mental note of this helpful tip. The mayor then waved from a distance, saying, "I live in Kosaji. If you have any problems, feel free to come to me. Cyclizar knows the way, so you can ride him there directly." "Okay," Naoki nodded. With that, the mayor departed. In the 198th year of the Alliance calendar, spring had just arrived in the Paldea region, and the temperature was still a bit chilly. Naoki and Cyclizar stood at the door of the cabin, watching the old mayor's figure gradually disappear into the distance. Only after he was out of sight did Naoki turn to look at the sleek Cyclizar beside him. Even though he was new to this world, he could tell from the Cyclizar's appearance and demeanor that it was healthy and well cared for. Thinking of the magical nature of Pokémon, Naoki's curiosity got the better of him. Cyclizar, he asked. Grew. The Cyclizar tilted its head and looked back. Clearly, it understood its name. Naoki continued, can you understand what I'm saying? If you can, just nod your head. Grew tilde. As expected, the Cyclizar nodded obediently. Just like in the anime, Pokémon could understand human language. Naoki's heart swelled with excitement. According to the lore, Pokémon were extraordinary creatures whose intelligence and emotions far surpassed those of ordinary animals. Some Pokémon even rivaled humans in their intellect and emotional capacity. Gazing at Cyclizar's shiny skin, Naoki couldn't resist reaching out to touch it. It felt different from what he had imagined, not like a real lizard but more like leather, much like a motorcycle's exterior. The Cyclizar didn't seem to mind his touch at all. In fact, it closed its eyes contentedly, looking quite pleased. Naoki mimicked Ash from the anime and said to Cyclizar, Cyclizar, please take care of me from now on. Grew tilde. After saying that, Naoki found himself at a loss for words. He withdrew his hand, and his stomach rumbled. The sound caught Cyclizar's attention, and its eyes drifted towards Naoki's belly. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Naoki asked, have you eaten? I'm about to make some food. Want to join me? Grew tilde. Even though Cyclizar had already eaten breakfast, it seemed delighted by the invitation from its new owner. It nodded and followed Naoki back into the cabin. Looking around at the wooden dwelling, Naoki felt a strange sense of belonging. This was his home now. He took a deep breath. After years of toiling away in the 996 grind, it would be nice to live a peaceful life as a farmer. Ranch life might be tiring, but at least he'd be working for himself. A new chapter was beginning. Naoki glanced at the Cyclizar beside him. Speak of the devil, he thought. Last night, he was wondering if he had any Pokémon to test his cheat code on, and this morning, he had a Cyclizar. All right then, it's you, he declared. Naoki put a pot of water on the stove to boil, preparing to cook some instant ramen. He was eager to see the effects of his cheat code and whether it could provide Pokémon with all sorts of magical benefits, just like in the games. 1 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Keep_smiling 29. Download app now. Hot ramen 3. As a simple staple, clear noodle soup was a breeze to make. Bring water to a boil, add the instant ramen noodles, and let them simmer. If ingredients are allowed, Naoki would normally add chopped scallions and a dollop of lard, allowing the noodles to soak up the broth before serving them in a bowl. The green onions would float on top, adding a splash of color to the dish and making it more appetizing. Finally, a drizzle of sesame oil and a soft-boiled egg would complete the meal. Just the thought of it made Naoki's mouth water. However, back in reality, all he had were basic seasonings. With a silent sigh, Naoki learned from yesterday's experience and added an appropriate amount of salt and chicken bouillon to the pot. Soon, a simple noodle soup was ready. As he filled 2 bowls, a prompt appeared in his mind with information about the dish. Instant ramen C-A low-level dish. Its taste is somewhat lacking due to the absence of key ingredients, but it's a good choice to warm the body and soul on a cold day. Cooking effect. Cold resistance level 1, provides resistance to cold temperatures. After consumption, the body will feel warm for 30 minutes. Comment. Despite the low quality of the ingredients, skillful cooking techniques have enhanced the flavor. When the player becomes wealthy and can cook master-level dishes, they may look back on this with nostalgia. Naoki was speechless. Meanwhile, the Cyclizar beside him sniffed the air. Grew. Naoki looked at it, then placed the 2 bowls of noodles on the table and beckoned to the Cyclizar. Want to try some? Grew. The Cyclizar frowned hesitantly. To be honest, it didn't really like the taste of ramen. Moreover, the bowl contained nothing but plain noodles. Judging by its appearance, it didn't seem very appetizing. Naoki understood immediately. He sighed inwardly, not wanting to force the Cyclizar, and said, "It's okay, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to." Then, excitement bubbling up, he added, "When I earn enough money to buy other ingredients, I'll make you something you'll love." Naoki was full of anticipation for his new life on the ranch. Hearing this, the cyclizer felt a pang of guilt. This was food specially prepared by its new owner. Would it be rude not to try it? With that thought, the cyclizer looked down at the steaming bowl of noodles and hesitantly chirped, "Grew." It would give this bowl of noodles a try. The cyclizer reached out with its two little paws, picked up the bowl, and slurped down the noodles in one gulp. The anticipated unpleasantness didn't come. Despite the simple flavor, after finishing the noodles, cyclizer suddenly felt a warmth spreading through its body, as if it was nestled in its mother's embrace. Grew. Witnessing the cyclizer's reaction, Naoki was surprised at first, but then he quickly understood. He looked at the cyclizer, thinking about the effect of the hot noodle soup, and asked with a smile, "How does it feel?" The cyclizer snapped out of its reverie and looked down at itself, confused. Grew. Why had it suddenly become warm without anyone riding on its back? Seeing its reaction, an idea sparked in Naoki's mind. It seems that food really can benefit Pokémon, he thought, then asked, "Do you feel warmer, not as cold as before?" Even though it was spring, the temperature hadn't fully risen yet, and it was still quite chilly, especially in the mornings. The cyclizer looked up in surprise, as if asking, "How did you know?" Grew. Naoki smiled. "It's the power of food." Grew. The cyclizer looked puzzled. This concept was a bit too advanced for it. After all, it was just a cyclizer. Naoki didn't try to explain further. The cyclizer would understand eventually as they lived together. Having confirmed the effect of his cooking on Pokémon, Naoki was in a good mood. He quickly finished his breakfast, washed the dishes, and stepped outside. The neglected ranch was covered in lush vegetation, with bird Pokémon occasionally flying overhead in search of food. Breathing in the fresh air, Naoki took a deep breath and decided to explore the area. He wanted to familiarize himself with the place. As he walked through the ranch with the cyclizer by his side, Naoki realized it was larger than he had initially thought. A wooden fence surrounded the ranch, and the area within was quite spacious. To the east was a vibrant valley, the calls of wild Pokémon echoing from within. The farmland took up a third of the ranch. There was a lake in the southwest corner and a river flowing around it. A wooden bridge spanned the river, connecting the ranch to the other side. Naoki stood on the bridge, looking at the rotting and broken wooden fence along the riverbank, realizing that he had a lot of work ahead of him. Clearing weeds, removing rocks, chopping down unwanted trees, and tilling the fields in preparation for planting, these were the tasks that lay ahead. As for the Pokémon shed where the Miltank used to be kept, Naoki wasn't planning on fixing it up just yet. There wasn't enough wood, and he was short on funds. After all, rebuilding the shed and purchasing Pokémon like Miltank would require a substantial investment. Standing in front of the lake at the edge of the farmland, Naoki squatted down and assessed its size and depth. Raising fish here would be a great idea, he thought. According to the original owner's memories, in addition to Pokémon, there were also ordinary animals in this world. However, Naoki preferred to raise water-type Pokémon instead of regular fish. Pokémon like Magikarp, Goldeen, Finneon, and Palpitoad. Or, to be a bit more daring, Gyarados, Milotic, Vaporeon, and Ludicolo. Although these fish weren't edible, as a collector at heart, Naoki would be satisfied just keeping them here and watching them thrive. Naoki mentally ticked off all the tasks he needed to accomplish, realizing that it would be a long journey ahead. The ranch management games he had played before flashed through his mind, and Naoki couldn't help but chuckle wryly. He had just escaped the 996 grind, and now he might be facing 007 working from midnight to midnight, 7 days a week. 1 comment 0 vote. Koraiden 4. After exploring the ranch, Naoki had a good grasp of the layout. As he hurried back with the cyclizer, he remembered that the old mayor had left some things for him in the utility room behind the house. Naoki rounded the wooden house and arrived at the utility room. Opening the door, he found various tools neatly placed on a large box. A hammer, a sickle, a hoe, a watering can, an axe, a bag of crop seeds wrapped in red cloth, and a brown book titled, Ranch Handbook. Most of the tools were made of iron and looked brand new, likely purchased by the kind old mayor as a gift. Naoki felt a surge of gratitude, he was indeed short on cash at the moment. After storing the tools, Naoki picked up the bag of seeds. Information about them immediately appeared in his mind. Turnip seeds. A spring crop that typically takes 3 months to mature, but in this world, it only takes about a month to harvest. Very suitable for novice ranchers. If cared for by grass-type Pokémon, its growth cycle can be shortened even further. Wow, Naoki was surprised. It grows that fast. He searched his memories for information and eventually found something relevant. The world was like this. Crops grew quickly and had short cycles. This was why food shortages were rare here. No wonder the Pokémon world feels like a utopia. Naoki thought to himself. Humans didn't have to worry about food, and the existence of Pokémon greatly increased productivity, allowing young people to travel freely and pursue their dreams. However, Naoki also learned from the original owner's memories that not all crops grew so rapidly. Some had extremely long growth cycles and only matured once a season. Naoki nodded silently, then picked up the book and opened it to the first page. It contained information on how to plant and cultivate crops. Each page featured a different crop, with detailed instructions on soil preparation, planting times, fertilization, watering cycles, and more. After flipping through it a few times, Naoki carefully put the book away and left the utility room with the cyclizer. Opposite the utility room was a cave. Naoki ventured inside and found that the space within wasn't very large. From the original owner's childhood memories, he learned that this cave served two main purposes. One was to grow mushrooms. The dark and humid environment was perfect for mushroom cultivation. The other was to house Woobat. The Woobat raised here would go out after sunset, foraging for food and bringing back various berries and fruits for the rancher. This incredible Pokémon was a natural gourmand. It could emit 200,000 Hz ultrasound from its ears to locate ripe fruit to satisfy its hunger. It would then use ultrasound waves to knock down the fruit, carefully selecting only the ripest ones to eat. Interesting, Naoki thought. After understanding the purpose of the cave, Naoki didn't linger. He returned to the front with his tools, surveyed the weed-infested farmland, and prepared to start small, clearing a patch to plant turnips. Seeing his actions, the cyclizer eagerly volunteered to help, chirping, "Grew." It swung its tail, and with a powerful thud, a rock shattered as if struck by a sledgehammer. Naoki was dumbfounded. He looked down at the hammer in his hand and the rock he had struggled to break, momentarily speechless. The cyclizer seemed delighted to be useful. Naoki sighed with a mix of amusement and relief. "All right then, let's work together." Grew. Meanwhile, in the central Paldea region, a basin nestled amidst towering, steep mountains housed a mysterious area known as Area Zero. Beneath this area lay a modern, advanced laboratory. In the deepest part of the lab, Professor Sada, a Pokémon researcher specializing in the legends of Paldea, and her husband, Professor Turo, gazed excitedly at the tall, enigmatic machine before them. "The time machine is finally complete," exclaimed Professor Sada, who wore a white coat and a necklace adorned with ancient animal teeth. "Finally, I can see the Pokémon from the future and the past mentioned in the Scarlet Book." Professor Turo was equally thrilled. The couple had spent years in the depths of Area Zero, conducting their research. One focused on the ancient past, the other on the future. With the unique properties of Area Zero, they had finally developed this device. It could teleport Pokeballs and capture Pokémon from different timelines, bringing them to the present. "Let's try it now. I want to see Pokémon from different eras with my own eyes," Professor Sada declared. Professor Turo nodded, a hint of tenderness crossing his face as he asked, "Isn't Arvin's 8th birthday coming up soon?" "Perfect timing," Sada hummed. "This time I can bring back Pokémon from various eras for Arvin to befriend." "Let's get started," Turo echoed his wife's enthusiasm. He took a deep breath, imagining Arvin's reaction to seeing those Pokémon. The child had always loved Pokémon. If he saw Pokémon from the future and the past, he would surely be overjoyed, right? Parents couldn't help but love their children. Come to think of it, they hadn't been back to spend time with Arvin in a while. This was a good opportunity to return home and take some time off to be with their son. Lost in thought, Professor Turo and his wife activated the time machine using an ID code. Buzz. With a strange hum, the time machine silently sprang to life. The space around the laboratory warped and twisted. The walls shimmered like mirrors, emitting rhythmic red and purple lights. The two professors stared intently at the machine, both excited and nervous. Soon, the rhythmic hum slowed down. Then, a dazzling red light flashed from the center of the time machine. Tension filled the air. As the light faded, a Pokémon they had never seen before materialized beneath the machine. It was a mysterious Pokémon, tall and robust, standing on two legs. Its body was scarlet, with white markings on its face, abdomen, thick legs, and tail. A thin, long tendril resembling a dragon's whisker extended from its head, with a cluster of bright blue-purple feathers beneath it, giving it a domineering and flamboyant appearance. Its golden eyes glared fiercely at the two humans before it. Success. Professor Sada and Professor Turo were relieved to see the Pokémon. Finally, their efforts had paid off. Let's get it into a Pokeball first, Professor Turo said calmly. Professor Sada nodded, raised her hand, and threw a pre-prepared Pokeball at the Pokémon. However, the moment the Pokémon saw the Pokeball, its golden eyes narrowed. It let out an unintelligible roar and casually swatted the Pokeball away with its right paw. The professors sensed hostility from the creature. Their expressions tightened, and they were about to release their own Pokémon. But then, the mysterious Pokémon from the past suddenly turned its head and looked around, as if confirming something. Soon, it seemed to have found its answer. In the next second, an unreadable emotion flickered in the Pokémon's eyes. It suddenly sprang forward, ignoring the two professors, and dashed out of the laboratory. It was so fast that it was gone before Professor Sada and Professor Turo could react. Then, it looked upward, the feathers on its head extending and transforming into wing-like structures, and it soared into the sky. How many years had it been waiting? Koraidon couldn't remember anymore. The expression on that person's face, when it fell into the time machine, flashed through its mind. Worry, anxiety, panic, and the arm reaching out to grab it. That day, it was still a Cycloser. That day, it had fallen into a time machine and traveled back to ancient times. There, it was transformed by an unknown force into its current form. 3 comments 0 vote. A lucky find in the forest 5. By noon, Naoki and Cycloser had cleared a small patch of land for planting and moved the chopped wood and stones into the utility room for storage. After a busy morning, Cycloser's stomach started rumbling. It looked down and said, "Gru, hungry." Naoki smiled. "Just a minute, I'll make lunch." The Cycloser's face brightened. "Gru." They washed their hands in the outdoor sink and went back inside. Cycloser sat under the eaves to enjoy the cool breeze while Naoki gathered ingredients and started cooking. Lunch was instant ramen again, but this time Naoki added some wild leeks he found on the ranch to enhance the flavor. Practice makes perfect, and in just a few minutes, a steaming bowl was ready. After pouring the noodles into a bowl, Naoki noticed that the grade of the instant ramen had changed from C to C, and the cold resistance buff duration had increased by 5 minutes. So the ingredients do affect the dish's rating, he mused. He picked up the bowl and placed it in front of the Cycloser, who was already waiting at the table. Cycloser looked down and saw the same plain noodles as before. A pitiful expression immediately appeared on its face. "Gru, impoverished." Naoki could only sigh. He thought of the little money left by the original owner and said reassuringly, "Just be patient. I'll take you to town to buy some delicious food this afternoon." Gru. Luckily, Cycloser didn't seem to mind Naoki's lack of funds. It was a simple and optimistic creature, and hearing Naoki's promise, it immediately perked up, looking forward to the evening's treats. Watching Cycloser slurp up the noodles, Naoki began to eat his own bowl with a worried expression. The remaining money will be gone soon after buying food. The land is just tilled, and the seeds can only be planted tomorrow. It'll take a month for them to mature. The weed-infested farmland had been hard and unsuitable for crop growth. This morning, Naoki had turned the soil and watered it to loosen it up. Although he didn't have any fertilizer, turnips were fortunately not picky about soil quality. "I need to find another way to make money until the turnips are harvested." Naoki fell into deep thought. Ways to make money. He thought back to his ranch management game days. One option was fishing, and another was to gather mushrooms and fruits in the back mountains to get through the early stages of the game. But he didn't have a fishing rod now, so the only option was to try his luck in the back mountains and see if he could find anything valuable. No sooner said than done. After lunch, Naoki prepared to head for the mountains. Upon learning of his intention, the Cycloser, which had been walking upright, suddenly dropped to all fours, turned around, and called out, "Gru." Naoki was startled for a moment, then realized that Cycloser had switched to riding mode. "Are you asking me to ride you?" The Cycloser nodded enthusiastically. "Gru." Curious, Naoki climbed onto its back. As soon as he was settled, Cycloser took off at a moderate pace, neither too fast nor too slow, carrying Naoki steadily towards the back mountains. Feeling the wind in his hair, Naoki thought, no wonder Cycloser is used for transportation in Paldea. This feels just like riding a motorcycle. After crossing a country road, they entered a lush forest. Sunlight streamed through the leaves, creating a dappled pattern on the ground. There were green caterpie nestled in bushes, fletchling perched on branches, rustling sounds emanating from the undergrowth, and strange, juicy fruits hanging from the trees. Life was vibrant everywhere. Naoki dismounted from Cyclizar and observed the various Pokémon around them with interest. The Pokémon, in turn, tilted their heads curiously, studying this unfamiliar human who had intruded into their forest. Caterpie evolves into Metapod at level 7, then Butterfree at level 10. A good choice for novice trainers. Fletchling, if I remember correctly, it's a regional bird in Kalos. Its final evolution, Talonflame, is a fire-flying type. Seems like a pretty cool Pokémon. Could that little white mouse be a Pachirisu, native to Paldea? Naoki spotted 3 small figures in the grass. 2 slightly larger white mice cautiously poked their heads out, protectively shielding a tiny white mouse behind them. A family of 3. Naoki looked around but didn't see a 4th mouse. Sensing his gaze, the 3 mice trembled, then turned and scurried into the bushes, vanishing without a trace. Naoki was momentarily disappointed, but he had to admit, Pokémon like Pachirisu were quite cute. He hadn't considered himself a fan of furry creatures before, but seeing the adorable Pachirisu and their soft white fur, he felt a certain warmth in his heart. I wonder how they feel to the touch. The forest was teeming with Pokémon, and after taking a walk with Cyclizar, Naoki was filled with excitement. If he were a trainer, he would definitely pull out Pokéballs and battle them, then capture them after earning their trust. Both the fast-growing Caterpie and the promising Fletchling would be perfect additions to his team. Unfortunately, according to the original owner's memories, a standard Pokéball cost 200 Pokédollars, which he couldn't afford right now. With a sigh, Naoki shifted his focus from the Pokémon to the wild produce growing in the forest. He walked over to a fruit-laden tree and reached out to pluck one. As he examined the fruit, information about it appeared in his mind. Pecha berry, a magical fruit that can cure poisoning. It has a sweet taste and can be used to make jam, puffins, and fruit cakes. It can also be added to yogurt to make fruit yogurt. Its unique flavor is loved by many Pokémon. Pecha berry. Naoki picked the berry and held it up to his nose, taking in its faint peach-like scent. He offered it to Cyclizar. Want to eat it? The Cyclizar took a look, then opened its mouth wide and swallowed the Pecha berry in one gulp. It seemed to taste pretty good. It looks like berries are a staple food for Pokémon, just like in the anime, Naoki thought, nodding to himself. He picked a few more Pecha berries from the tree, intending to take them back to the ranch. However, he only took a small portion. If berries were food for Pokémon, then other Pokémon in this forest also needed them. If he took all the Pecha berries, many Pokémon would likely go hungry. After gathering the Pecha berries, Naoki and Cyclizar ventured deeper into the forest. The forest was vast, and perhaps they were heading in the wrong direction, but along the way, Naoki didn't encounter any other fruit-bearing trees. Time passed unnoticed until it was evening. Tired from walking, Naoki sat down to rest under a large tree, glancing at the sky and deciding it was time to head back. Just then, the Cyclizar's nose twitched. What's wrong? Naoki asked, turning to look. The Cyclizar turned its head, sniffing the air as if trying to pinpoint a direction. After a moment, it seemed to have located something. It stood up and pointed in one direction. Naoki followed its gaze to a patch of bare ground, confused at first, but then he noticed something odd. The grass in a circular area around the base of a tree had withered. The Cyclizar pointed excitedly in that direction. Intrigued, Naoki stood up and walked over with Cyclizar to investigate the strange area. He brushed aside the fallen leaves and yellowed grass to reveal a pitch-black object underneath. At that moment, a peculiar scent wafted into Naoki's nostrils. It was a unique smell, difficult to describe in words. He wondered what it could be, but the next second, information about the object appeared in his mind. Black truffle. A premium ingredient of the highest quality, it is a rare delicacy. It can be made into black truffle steamed eggs or cream soup with butter. Although it doesn't have any special effects on its own, it can significantly enhance the effect of cooking. 1 comments 0 vote. Money 06. Black truffle. Perhaps due to his financial struggles, Naoki's first thought upon seeing it was, this thing must be worth a lot, right? But then, he noticed the buff effect. Although it doesn't have any beneficial effects, it can significantly enhance the effect of cooking. What was this? Some kind of advanced ingredient? Naoki could vaguely understand its value based on his experience with similar ingredients in games from his previous life. In those games, adding such ingredients to dishes not only increased the level of effects from LV1 to LV3 but also had the potential to turn temporary buffs into permanent ones. This made black truffles incredibly valuable. This was a good find. Naoki carefully unearthed the entire black truffle. Seeing his actions, the cyclizer laid down beside him, holding its breath. Only after the palm-sized truffle was safely tucked into Naoki's backpack did it look up and ask curiously, "Gru, this is great stuff that can improve our quality of life," Naoki explained to the cyclizer with a smile. He weighed it in his hand and estimated the black truffle to be about 1 kilogram. As a layman, he didn't know the exact price of black truffles, but judging by its size and quality, he could tell it wouldn't be cheap. Glancing at the sky, Naoki saw that it was getting late, so he hopped onto the cyclizer and let it carry him back to the ranch. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Naoki had just returned to the ranch and was about to pour himself a glass of water when he heard a whistle from outside. Ding ding ding. He walked out the door and saw a van with a Wave logo pulling up. The driver, a burly man with muscular arms and a buzz cut, leaned out the window and said enthusiastically, "You must be Naoki, the new owner of this ranch. Mayor Clavel told me about you. I'm Zach, and I'm responsible for purchasing goods from nearby ranches. Pleased to meet you." "Hello, Mr. Zach," Naoki greeted politely. Zach turned off the engine and jumped out of the van. He looked around and noticed the freshly tilled farmland. Grinning, he said, "Looks like you've got the hang of ranch life. Got anything to sell?" Zach was just making casual conversation. He knew a novice rancher wouldn't have mature crops, wool, or milk to sell yet. After all, developing a ranch took time. But the next second, he saw the new ranch owner pull out a large, black object. Zach, with his extensive knowledge, instantly recognized it. His eyes widened in surprise. A black truffle. Wow, this size is incredibly rare. Where did you find it? The back mountains, Naoki replied. Can I sell it? Zach nodded eagerly. Of course. This thing fetches a high price. Normal quality black truffles go for about 5,000 Pokédollars per kilogram. The quality and size of the one you have are top-notch. This kind of black truffle is hard to come by in the market, and the price is around 15,000 Pokédollars per kilogram. Its unique taste was sought after by many, especially the upper class among the wealthy and aristocratic families. They weren't short on money. 15,000 Pokédollars per kilogram. Naoki did the math. In other words, the black truffle in his hand was worth a total of 30,000 Pokédollars. Naoki was tempted by the price. Should he sell it? This level of rare ingredient could greatly enhance the effects of Pokémon food when cooked. Could he? If he sold it, he would have enough money to buy seeds, repair the ranch, and stock up on food. For a moment, Naoki hesitated. But then, he made a decision. He had to think long-term. Even though the black truffle could improve his cooking, exchanging it for cash would accelerate the ranch's development and ultimately generate more income. Once the ranch was thriving, he could use the money to buy other high-quality ingredients with similar effects. With that in mind, Naoki no longer hesitated and decided to sell it. Zach retrieved a scale from his van, weighed the truffle, and pointed to the reading. 2 kilograms and 200 grams. He pulled out a calculator and a small notebook, did some quick calculations, and then announced, the total comes to 33,000 Pokédollars. Okay, Naoki nodded. Then I'll take this black truffle off your hands. Zach said as he pulled out a stack of bills from his wallet and handed it over. Naoki took the money, counted it carefully, and let out a sigh of relief. The first money he had earned as a rancher was now in his hands. He could finally stop eating bland instant ramen. Zach still had to visit other ranches to collect goods. Before leaving, he looked around the ranch and suggested, aside from growing crops and raising Pokémon, there are many other ways to make money. Haven't you been to Cascarafa yet? If you go there, remember to buy a fishing rod from the general store. While your crops are growing, you can earn some money by fishing. Ah, but don't worry too much. It's tough at the beginning, but it gets much easier in the summer. Then, besides growing regular crops, you can also cultivate leppa berries to make juice. Berry juice with that farm-fresh flavor is very popular in big cities. Leppa berries? Naoki raised an eyebrow at the familiar name. However, he wasn't thinking about brewing juice. Instead, he wondered if the berry juice he made might have some strange effects, like his cooking. Naoki nodded, keeping his thoughts to himself, and said to Zach, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you very much. Zach smiled cheerfully. Good luck. After seeing Zach off, Naoki returned to the cabin and eyed the small piece of black truffle left on the table, a fragment that had broken off while he was digging it up. Black truffles are so valuable. I wonder if training a Diglett could help uncover more hidden underground. Naoki mused. He decided to keep this small piece, saving it to enhance a future dish when the time was right. As for now, looking at the thick stack of Pokédollars in his hand, Naoki's spirits soared. It was time to go shopping in town and buy some new ingredients for cooking. Naoki hopped onto Cyclizar, pointed in the direction of town, and the Cyclizar took off. As they rode, Naoki gazed at the sunset-painted sky and hummed a tune, riding on my beloved little motorcycle Tilda. Crew. The Cyclizar looked back, puzzled. His beloved little motorcycle, was he talking about him? 13 comments 0 vote. Unexpected arrival at the Ranch 7. Kosagi was located in the southern region of the Paldea, a bustling coastal town. From the original owner's memories, Naoki knew the city was known for its various local festivals. For example, the Spring Festival, the Water Pokémon Rally, and the Summer-only fireworks display. These unique events attracted many visitors, and combined with the flourishing agriculture and animal husbandry around the town, Kosagi had developed steadily over time. The market, within the town, was even more famous. Naoki walked down the street with Cyclizar, observing pedestrians with various Pokémon strolling leisurely in the sea breeze. The atmosphere was cozy and relaxed. This time, besides buying food, Naoki had other important tasks. He needed to visit the town's carpentry shop, general store, seed shop, and the store that sold ranch Pokémon and ordinary animals. It's almost 6 o'clock, Naoki thought, a little worried the shops might close soon. He paused and asked the Cyclizar, "Are you hungry?" Crew. The Cyclizar nodded, then shook its head. It was intelligent enough to understand that Naoki had things to do, so it could wait a little longer. Seeing its response, Naoki smiled, patted its head, and said, "Good boy, then let's go to the general store first." Grew Tilda. The town wasn't big. Perhaps to prevent visitors from getting lost, the locations of various shops were clearly marked on both street signs and billboards. Locating the general store on the map, Naoki headed straight for it. After crossing an intersection, a red brick building appeared before Naoki. It was evening, and the store was empty except for a bald man wearing glasses sitting behind the counter, fiddling with a fungus bag. Hearing the wind chimes jingle as the door opened, the man looked up. "Ah, a customer. Welcome." Naoki greeted him politely, then asked, "Do you have any seasonings here?" "Yes." On the innermost shelf, Naoki walked over and found a wide variety of seasonings on the shelves, just as the man had said. Oil, salt, vinegar, soy sauce, flour, spices, red bean paste, butter, sugar, pepper. Their prices were clearly marked on the shelves. For example, a bag of flour cost 200 Pokédollars, a bottle of oil cost 100 Pokédollars, and red bean paste cost 150 Pokédollars. Looking at these prices, Naoki was a bit puzzled about the cost of things in the Pokémon world. A small bag of flour was the same price as a Pokéball. From that perspective, Pokéballs didn't seem that expensive. After a moment's consideration, Naoki bought one of each seasoning. When he brought his items to the counter, the shopkeeper looked surprised. He took out a bag and asked, "Did you just move to Kosagi?" "Yes," Naoki nodded. The shopkeeper smiled. "Then enjoy your life in Kosagi. Alright, the total comes to 2,820 Pokédollars." Naoki didn't pay immediately. Instead, he asked, "Do you have fishing rods here?" "Fishing rods?" "Yes." The shopkeeper turned around and retrieved a few fishing rods from a shelf, placing them on the counter. "Each fishing rod has a different price," he explained. "This one is 2,000 Pokédollars. If you pair it with bait, you can catch Pokémon and fish anywhere there's water. This fishing rod costs 5,000 Pokédollars. It's made of higher quality materials, so it performs better than the 2,000 Pokédollar rod and is more durable. And this one here is 15,000 Pokédollars. It's the newest and most powerful fishing rod, made with the most advanced materials and boasting top-notch performance." Naoki's eyes scanned the 3 fishing rods. He ultimately chose the standard 2,000 Pokédollar rod, planning to use it for the time being. The total comes to 4,820 Pokédollars. "Since this is your first time shopping here, I'll give you a box of bait for free. Please come again." The shopkeeper smiled and handed him a tin can. "Thank you," Naoki said, taking his purchases and leaving the store. His next stop was the carpentry shop, located on the edge of town with a forest behind it. A wooden stake stood outside the shop, a saw stuck in it. Just as Naoki was about to knock, the door opened. A sturdy woman with a high pink ponytail and a headband emerged. After Naoki explained his purpose, she led him into the workshop at the back. "Are you the new ranch owner who just moved here?" she asked curiously. Naoki was slightly taken aback, then realized that Mayor Clavel had probably informed her of his arrival. He nodded. "My name is Naoki. Just call me Kelly," the woman replied. "Yes, Miss Kelly." As they walked, Kelly explained the process of expanding the ranch house. "You haven't named the ranch yet, have you?" Naoki shook his head. "Not yet. I only arrived yesterday." "No worries, just making conversation," Kelly said with a smile. "Well, Mayor Clavel filled me in. You're here to learn about restoring the Pokémon shed and expanding the house, right?" "That's right. Then let me explain. Repairing the Pokémon shed requires 50,000 Pokédollars and 300 pieces of lumber. Once repaired, you can raise Miltank and Mareep there. Of course, that's a bit pricey for you right now. So I recommend starting with building a chicken coop and raising regular chickens. The eggs they lay can be sold for profit. A chicken coop only needs 20,000 Pokédollars and 150 pieces of lumber. Also, you'll need to build a silo on the ranch to store feed. We'll give you one for free the first time you build it." Naoki nodded thoughtfully, taking mental note of the prices. "What about expanding the house?" he asked. "That's much simpler," Kelly replied. "A fully functional house would cost around 2 million Pokédollars. We can help you add a second floor, a separate kitchen and bathroom, and renovate the basement. Usually, ranchers use the basement for making wine. We also offer custom furniture services. Besides basic tables, chairs, and benches, you can also buy wallpaper, carpets, refrigerators, storage cabinets, various light fixtures, and so on." 5 minutes later, Naoki walked out of the carpentry shop. Calculating the remaining money, he realized he still had a long way to go. "This feels even busier than my 996 job," he sighed, then envisioned the day when the ranch would be restored to its former glory. A look of anticipation appeared on his face. By then, he could relax and enjoy the leisurely life of a rancher. Since the Pokémon shed wasn't a priority at the moment, there was no need to visit the shop that sold ranch Pokémon just yet. Riding Cyclizar, Naoki headed to his final destination, the seed shop. The seed shop owner was a middle-aged man with brown hair and a slightly plump figure, wearing a brown coat. When Naoki arrived, the man was having dinner with his wife and daughter. Seeing a customer, the owner immediately stood up and greeted him. "Welcome, take a look around and see what seeds you'd like to buy." Naoki wasn't sure what to get since he only had a bag of turnip seeds given by the mayor. Following the owner's lead, he saw a vast array of seeds in containers. Potatoes, turnips, garlic, strawberries, cabbage, cucumbers, radishes, tomatoes, grass, and even seeds for fruit trees like peaches and oranges. Naoki was dazzled by the variety. The seed shop owner explained, "These are crops and fruit trees suitable for spring planting. They're easy to grow after cultivation. As long as you water and fertilize them on time, they'll grow big and healthy." Naoki nodded silently. The seeds in this world were different from those in the Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley games he had played. There were many seeds in each packet here, enough to plant a large area, unlike in the games where one packet only covered one tile of land. After some thought, Naoki decided to buy a packet of each seed, including those for the fruit trees. The seed prices varied. The basic turnips were only 60 Pokédollars per packet, while strawberries, cucumbers, and the like cost 120 or 150 per packet. Altogether, the seeds came to 1,370 Pokédollars. As a result, he only had 27,000 Pokédollars left from selling the black truffle. After packing up the seeds, Naoki left the store with Cyclizar. It was getting dark outside. Naoki looked up at the starry sky, took a deep breath, and said, "All right, let's go grab some dinner." Grew. The Cyclizar looked a little downcast. Naoki smiled and patted its head, then led it into a restaurant. After a long day, he planned to eat out tonight. The waiter handed him the menu, which included both human food and dishes specifically for Pokémon. A Pokémon like Cyclizar probably preferred meat, right? Thinking of this, Naoki ordered a meat dish for Cyclizar and a fruit platter as a reward for its hard work today. Soon, the food arrived at their table. Watching Cyclizar eat with gusto, Naoki felt a warm glow in his heart. Pokémon were so innocent and adorable. He looked down at the fragrant vegetable stew and corn soup in front of him, and their information popped up in his mind. As expected, these dishes didn't have any special abilities that could enhance Pokémon. Naoki was sure of it now. It seems only the food I cook has that kind of power. After dinner, Naoki went back to the general store to buy ingredients for the next few days. Since he didn't have a refrigerator at home, he only bought enough for 3 days. The temperature was still cool this time of year, so the food wouldn't spoil easily if left indoors. Naoki carried his bags of groceries and climbed back onto Cyclizar. In the darkness, the man and Pokémon headed home. The night air was chilly, and the wind felt cold against his skin. Cyclizar was sensitive to the cold, but Naoki, riding on its back, felt warm, which helped to ward off the chill. At that moment, Cyclizar suddenly craved another bowl of Naoki's hot noodle soup. Cyclizar was fast, and they returned to the ranch in less than 30 minutes. The ranch was pitch black at night. Naoki had anticipated this and brought a flashlight with him. He fumbled for it in the dark, but before he could find it, he heard a loud bang. The sound was deafening, accompanied by the cracking of trees. It was as if something had fallen from the sky, crashing into the ranch and knocking down a group of trees. Startled, Naoki finally located the flashlight and quickly shone it towards the sound. Soon, he saw a strange, dark figure in his farmland. Naoki froze, and Cyclizar beside him rose from its riding position, looking warily in the same direction. It sensed an unusual presence. The flashlight beam illuminated the dark figure, which lay motionless on the ground, seemingly unconscious. With the help of the light, Naoki finally made out the figure's true form. A scarlet body, a thick tail, flamboyant dragon whiskers, and an airbag on its chest that resembled a motorcycle tire. It was. Naoki was stunned. 2 comments 0 vote. Koraidon, god of the past 8. Inside the lit cabin, Naoki and Cyclizar stared at the Pokémon they had dragged in from the field. With a single glance, Naoki recognized the Pokémon. The guardian deity of paradise, the winged king, the ancient god. These were the names associated with this Pokémon. Originally nameless, it was dubbed Koraidon by the doctor who discovered it after it was summoned to this era. That's right, Koraidon, one of the legendary Pokémon from the game, Pokémon Scarlet. According to legend, it could split the earth with its fists. There was no information about its ecology in the world yet, but some people believed it to be the ancient ancestor of Pokémon like Cyclizar. Although similar in appearance to Cyclizar, Koraidon was known for its tenacious and violent nature. Naoki looked at Koraidon, then at Cyclizar, and noticed the similarities in their appearance and skeletal structure. So, the question was, how did Koraidon end up here? Naoki fell into deep thought. He was recalling information about Koraidon from the game. Summoned by Professor Sada through a time machine, it fled Area 0 after losing a territorial battle with another Koraidon. It eventually collapsed from exhaustion on a beach in southern Paldea and was found by the game's protagonist. So, what's the situation now? Naoki was confused. He looked at the innocent-looking Cyclizar across from him, then down at Koraidon. Suddenly, Koraidon's closed eyes snapped open, its golden pupils filled with a ferocious aura, locking onto the human in front of it. Naoki was shocked, but then, the violent aura vanished, though Koraidon continued to stare at him. Naoki tilted his head in confusion. Grew. Cyclizar tilted its head as well. Hearing the third party's call, Koraidon's expression changed slightly. Upon seeing Cyclizar clearly, disbelief flashed in Koraidon's eyes, then a flicker of understanding. Memories flooded back. A long, long time ago, when it was still a Cyclizar, it had also encountered a Koraidon one night. Today was just like that day. However, back then, it was in the same position as the Cyclizar opposite it. It looked at the Cyclizar, slightly frightened by its aura, and suddenly realized what had happened to the Koraidon it met when it was a Cyclizar. That was itself. It had fallen through a time warp, spending 10,000 years in a distant epoch. Finally recalled, it had arrived in an even earlier time period. The Cyclizar's eyes were fixed on Koraidon, a tense energy crackling between them. Naoki, sensing the potential danger, quickly stepped in front of Cyclizar, shielding it from Koraidon's gaze. "Hey there," he said, forcing a friendly tone, "are you all right? I saw you fall from the sky, so I brought you back to my place." It was best to tread carefully with this strange, seemingly aggressive Pokémon. Koraidon's gaze shifted to Naoki, its eyes narrowing. A complex mix of emotions flickered across its face, disappointment, resentment, a tinge of jealousy. This Cyclizar was its past self, a reminder of a time before its evolution, before its journey through time and space. Naoki silently observed Koraidon, his own heart pounding with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He mirrored Koraidon's stillness, hoping to avoid provoking it. Suddenly, a loud growl erupted from Koraidon's stomach, shattering the tense silence. Naoki blinked, a wry smile tugging at his lips. He and Cyclizar had already eaten, but it seemed their unexpected guest was famished. "Are you hungry?" Naoki ventured. "I have some food here. Would you like some?" Koraidon's demeanor changed instantly, its aggressive posture softening. It nodded eagerly, its earlier ferocity replaced by a childlike eagerness for sustenance. Naoki couldn't help but chuckle inwardly at the Pokémon's sudden change of heart. He stood up, beckoning Cyclizar to follow him to the cupboard. There, he retrieved a fresh piece of pork belly he had purchased earlier that day. Pork belly, with its perfect balance of lean and fatty meat, was ideal for hardy Pokémon like Koraidon. He carefully washed and trimmed the meat, then sliced it into bite-sized pieces, placing them in a bowl. Next, Naoki gathered the seasonings he had purchased: dark soy sauce, light soy sauce, oyster sauce, sugar, black pepper, and cornstarch for thickening. He combined these in a bowl, mixing them thoroughly with the pork belly until the meat was evenly coated. Once the flavors had melded, he transferred the pork to a skillet and began to cook it slowly over medium-low heat. Soon, golden fat began to sizzle, filling the room with an irresistible aroma. The marinated pork slowly turned a rich golden brown, its succulent juices bubbling enticingly. Naoki glanced back at Koraidon, who had shifted to a quadrupedal stance, its eyes glued to the pan, drool dripping from its chin. Even Cyclizar, despite having already eaten, couldn't help but salivate at the tantalizing smell. Naoki smiled to himself. He estimated the cooking time, and when the pork was done, he divided it into 2 plates. As he looked down, information about the dish materialized in his mind. Pan-seared pork belly. Ingredients, heat, seasoning, and unique cooking techniques create this popular dish. The juicy, flavorful pork belly provides unparalleled vitality to Pokémon. Cooking effects: major physical recovery, major strength increase, minor experience, and insight gain for Pokémon. Duration: 60 minutes. Comment: fresh ingredients and excellent cooking skills combine to create this delicious pan-seared pork belly, perfect for Pokémon who crave power. Naoki was surprised by the high quality of the dish. But he noticed the short duration of its effects. He recalled the black truffle he had found earlier. Could adding this rare ingredient make the effects permanent? He would have to experiment. Later, he brought the plates to Cyclizar and Koraidon, watching as they devoured the pork with gusto. Then, an idea struck him. He retrieved 2 glasses, 2 berries, and 2 bottles of moo milk. A refreshing juice would be the perfect complement to the rich meal, and he was curious to see if squeezing juice directly from the fruit would trigger his cooking ability. The berries resembled ordinary fruits, but there weren't enough to make a full serving of juice. Naoki decided to add some milk to the mix. After washing his hands, he squeezed the juice from the berries into the glasses, then added the moo milk and stirred. The milk, purchased from the Kosaji market, was a 500 ml bottle and had cost him 120 Pokédollars. As the juice and milk blended, Naoki watched as information about the concoction appeared in his mind. Berry milk, a blend of fresh berries and nutritious moo milk. This fruity drink is a delightful treat for Pokémon. Cooking effect: limited to Miltank or Tauros. After consumption, the quality of milk produced by the drinker will be slightly improved, making it tastier and more nutritious. Comment: delicious berry milk, a treat you deserve. 1 comment, 0 vote. Flavors of the past 9. Improve the quality of milk. Exclusive to Miltank or Tauros. Naoki raised an eyebrow, surprised. He had assumed his cooking would enhance a Pokémon's strength and speed, or provide other direct benefits. But this indirect buff, this enhancement of a specific product, was a new revelation. It would be incredibly useful on the ranch. Would other dishes yield similar effects? There were so many possibilities and so many recipes to discover. It would take a lifetime, perhaps even 50 years, to explore them all. But regardless, Naoki's curiosity was piqued. He was eager to experiment and uncover the hidden potential of his culinary creations. Plenty of time for that, he mused, turning to offer the glasses of berry milk to Cyclizar and Koraidon. While neither were milk-producing Pokémon, the drink would still be a refreshing treat. Before being summoned by the time machine, Koraidon had just finished a fierce battle with another Koraidon. It had sustained minor injuries, but the urgency to return to this time and space had driven it to rush home without rest. Now, having devoured Naoki's cooking and savoring the familiar flavors, Koraidon felt rejuvenated, its injuries healing rapidly. Overcome with gratitude and affection, it approached Naoki, licking his face with its long tongue. Naoki, initially startled, remembered Koraidon's playful nature from the anime. He relaxed, a chuckle escaping his lips. But as Koraidon's saliva dripped down his face, he gently pushed the Pokémon away. Koraidon, unfazed, crouched nearby with a goofy grin, its thick tail thumping against the floor as it watched Naoki wash his face. After Cycloser finished its meal, Naoki cleared the table, washed the dishes, and stretched his weary muscles. It had been a long day, and it was time for some much-needed rest. There was no bathroom in the ranch house, so Naoki stepped outside and rinsed himself off with the garden hose. He then retreated to bed, yawning as he flipped through the ranch encyclopedia, studying the information on spring crops. He had a lot to do tomorrow. Clear the fields of unnecessary trees and rocks, till the soil, plant seeds and saplings. He also planned to try fishing, hoping to catch something he could sell to supplement his income. Until the crops matured and the Pokémon house was repaired, this was his only means of making money. As Naoki drifted to sleep, he glanced at the bedside where Cycloser lay sprawled on the floor, yawning sleepily. Koraidon had also found a comfortable spot and closed its eyes. The familiar scent of Naoki, the comforting environment, and the lingering aroma of food created a sense of ease and security. Despite the ranch's remote location, Naoki wasn't afraid. Cycloser's presence offered a sense of protection, and Koraidon, despite its initial aggression, seemed to have settled into a peaceful slumber. Naoki smiled, then turned off the light and surrendered to sleep. The next morning, his internal alarm clock, honed from years of corporate life, woke him at the crack of dawn. A glance at the pendulum clock on the wall told him it was only 6:15 a.m. He briefly considered going back to sleep, but the thought of the day's tasks ahead quickly dispelled any lingering drowsiness. He rubbed his eyes, got out of bed, and started preparing breakfast. The rustling sounds woke Koraidon, who, upon seeing Naoki up and about, simply rolled over and went back to sleep. Cycloser, however, perked up immediately. Naoki chuckled as he passed by, patting the Pokémon's head. "Go back to sleep," he said softly. "I'll wake you when breakfast is ready." Cycloser let out a soft "grah," and obediently curled back up on the floor. For breakfast, Naoki decided to make a sandwich for Cycloser. He combined toast from the Kosuji market with leftover steak, freshly sliced tomatoes and lettuce, and a generous slathering of cheese sauce. As he assembled the sandwich, the familiar information popped up in his mind. Sandwich D, a combination of fresh ingredients, meat and vegetables, rich in nutrition, and ideal for breakfast. Cooking effect: minor energy increase, making Pokémon more energetic and less prone to sleepiness. Evaluation: a basic sandwich, but a great choice for breakfast. Just a minor energy boost. Naoki mused, a hint of disappointment in his voice. But then, he considered that the only ingredient he had actually cooked was the steak, and the result seemed rather impressive. After serving Cycloser its breakfast sandwich, Naoki turned to prepare his own. He eyed the remaining pack of instant ramen, deciding against wastefulness. However, as he was about to dig in, Koraidon, ever vigilant, noticed the discrepancy. It glanced down at its own sandwich, then at Naoki's bowl of steaming noodles. With a sudden burst of energy, it switched to a bipedal stance, snatched the bowl, and began to slurp down the noodles with gusto. Naoki watched in astonishment. "You like that stuff?" For Koraidon, this bowl of ramen was a taste of home, the first meal Naoki had prepared for it, a meal with special significance. In the future, as the ranch prospered, Naoki would rarely make instant ramen again. Now, seeing it once more, nostalgia flooded over Koraidon. "Grauauauaushi tilde," Koraidon exclaimed, its voice muffled by noodles. Naoki couldn't understand the exact words, but Koraidon's expression clearly conveyed its delight. It was a stark contrast to Cycloser's indifference towards the ramen. After washing the dishes, Naoki grabbed his hoe and headed outside, ready to tackle the day's work. Thanks to yesterday's practice, Naoki and Cycloser had developed a good working rhythm. Cycloser used its powerful tail to smash rocks and clear debris, while Naoki followed behind, tilling the soil with his hoe. They encountered a few large trees that were too tough for Naoki to handle alone. He handed the axe to Cycloser, who expertly felled them with swift, precise strikes. Koraidon observed this from a distance. Suddenly, it let out a series of excited cries and then charged towards a large tree. It wrapped its arms around the trunk, muscles bulging, and with a mighty heave, uprooted the entire tree, tossing it aside as if it were a mere twig. Naoki and Cycloser watched in stunned silence. Koraidon, seemingly energized by its feat, continued to help, clearing the land with surprising efficiency. Naoki's eyes widened. What incredible strength! Is it trying to repay the favor? Koraidon's assistance significantly reduced their workload. With the dragon fighting type Pokemon's help, they cleared a large portion of the farmland in just one morning. Naoki wiped the sweat from his brow as he watered the newly cleared land, making it softer and more suitable for planting. A water-type Pokémon would be handy right now, he thought. After watering, the soil needed time to settle before planting could begin. Naoki wasn't in a rush to clear the entire field at once. There weren't enough seeds, and they were short on manpower. The progress they had made was more than enough to keep them busy for the foreseeable future. 1 comments 0 vote. A day by the river 10. At noon, Naoki prepared chilled cucumber slices. The effect of this dish was to combat heat, providing a cooling sensation after consumption. Koraidon and Cycloser, however, still enjoyed their sandwiches. It wasn't that Naoki didn't want to experiment with new recipes, but the morning's work had left him exhausted. He decided to take a break in the afternoon and try his luck at fishing by the river. Worried that Cycloser might get bored while he was fishing, Naoki eyed the glutinous rice flour and red bean paste in the cupboard, a thought forming in his mind. Perhaps he could make a snack to enjoy while fishing. With the idea firmly planted, Naoki set to work. He mixed the glutinous rice flour with water, kneading it into a dough. He rolled it into long strips, flattened them, and filled them with a mixture of red bean paste and sugar. He then carefully rolled the strips into balls, creating snow-white dumplings. Cycloser, intrigued by the unfamiliar creation, approached to observe. "Gra," it inquired, tilting its head. Naoki smiled. "These are called glutinous rice dumplings. I wonder if you've ever tried them." Cycloser shook its head. "Gra, well, you can try them this afternoon," Naoki offered. "Though I'm not sure if you'll like the taste." Cycloser nodded enthusiastically. "Gra," Naoki chuckled. "You silly thing, you haven't even tasted them yet. Aren't you worried they might taste like instant ramen?" "Gra," Cycloser touched its head with its claws, embarrassed. Koraidon, on the other hand, found the exchange utterly baffling. Had it truly been that simple-minded before? Did Koraidon perceive it in the same way now? Naoki, observing the interaction, turned to Koraidon. "Koraidon," he began, and the legendary Pokémon immediately trotted over to stand beside him. "Gra," Cycloser questioned, tilting its head in confusion. Naoki paused, considering his words, then asked, "Did you come here from the Paldea crater?" He wanted to confirm if this Koraidon shared the same backstory as the one from the games, fleeing Area Zero due to a territorial dispute with another Koraidon. Koraidon nodded, its eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. Naoki's suspicions were confirmed. As expected, he thought to himself. He then inquired, "Were you fighting with another Koraidon before arriving here?" Koraidon looked at him in surprise. Gra-ow-ow-ow-shi. It couldn't believe Naoki knew about the battle. Naoki smiled inwardly. Of course he knew, but he didn't want to dwell on the painful past, so he asked instead, "What are your plans for the future?" Koraidon's answer was a determined, "Ga-ah." Although Naoki didn't understand the exact words, the meaning was clear. Koraidon wanted to stay here. This was exactly what Naoki had hoped for. Koraidon's strength would be an invaluable asset to the ranch. Naoki tried to maintain his composure as he replied, "You can stay, but you have to help me manage the ranch." Before he could finish, Koraidon eagerly nodded in agreement. At that moment, the last dumpling was wrapped, and Naoki placed them in the steamer to cook. He then grabbed a stool, a fishing rod, and some bait, heading towards the river that bordered the ranch. Before casting his line, he turned to Koraidon and Cycloser, "I'm going fishing. You two go have some fun." In the springtime, the ranch was dotted with dandelions and small yellow wildflowers. Cycloser, taking Naoki's advice, wandered off to play. Its attention was caught by a butterfly, and it excitedly chased after it through the tall grass. After a while, Cycloser came to a stop in front of a fluffy white dandelion. It lowered its head, curiously examining the delicate seed head. Suddenly, a tickle in its nose caused Cycloser to sneeze, sending the dandelion seeds scattering into the blue sky. Cycloser raised its head, an innocent curiosity in its eyes. Naoki turned to Koraidon, who was standing beside him, observing the scene with interest. Aren't you going to play? Naoki asked. Ga-ah-ah-ah. Koraidon shook its head, its gaze fixed on the flowing river and the shadows of fish darting beneath the surface. It then looked at the fishing rod in Naoki's hand, a mischievous glint in its eyes. Suddenly, a light bulb seemed to go off in Koraidon's head. Before Naoki could react, Koraidon's aura surged, and it leapt high into the air, transforming into its sprinting build form as it crashed into the river with a mighty splash. Splash! Water erupted into the air, raining down in a torrential downpour. Naoki stood dumbfounded, staring at the scene in amazement. Koraidon emerged from the water, a triumphant grin on its face. "Gah!" it exclaimed, clearly proud of its accomplishment. Naoki watched as the churning water settled, revealing several fish floating belly up, their eyes wide and unblinking. They had been stunned by Koraidon's forceful entry. Naoki was speechless for a moment. He finally managed to say, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Koraidon, but there was no need for such a dramatic display." Koraidon's head drooped, disappointment evident in its eyes. "Gah!" Naoki quickly reassured it. No, I'm not blaming you. You did a great job." Koraidon's eyes lit up. "Gaogashi tilde." Naoki sighed, shaking his head with a smile. He instructed Koraidon to gather the stunned fish and place them in a bucket filled with river water. Koraidon eagerly complied, scooping up the fish with surprising dexterity. The fish weren't very large, but for Naoki, who was just starting out, this was a good haul. He picked out 3 Magikarp that had been caught in the chaos. Koraidon looked at the 3 red fish, puzzled. "Gah-ow, they're not for eating," Naoki explained. He had initially intended to release them back into the river, but then he remembered the lake on his ranch. He could raise Magikarp alongside the Miltank he planned to acquire. It would be a long process to get the ranch up and running, so why not raise some fish in the meantime? Not just Magikarp, but the other river fish as well. Naoki carried the bucket to the lake and gently released the 3 Magikarp. He watched them for a few moments, unsure if they were merely stunned or if Koraidon's attack had been fatal. Fortunately, the Magikarp were unharmed. After a few minutes of floating listlessly, they slowly regained consciousness. They swam off into the depths of the lake, with a dazed look on their face. 0 comments 0 vote. Gifts and discoveries 11. New facilities added to the ranch, fish pond +1. Naoki thought with a satisfied smile as he watched the Magikarp explore their new home. His fishing plans had been derailed by Koraidon's antics, but Naoki, checking the time, decided to head back to the house and see if the dumplings were ready. As he turned to leave, bucket of fish in hand, Cyclizar bounded towards him, clutching a small yellow wildflower in its claws. "For me?" Naoki asked, surprised and touched by the gesture. Cyclizar nodded, a wide, innocent grin on its face. Naoki accepted the flower, examining the delicate petals. Perhaps this is why so many people love Pokémon, he mused. They're simple, pure kindness. Most Pokémon would remain loyal for life if treated well, even protecting their trainers with their own lives. With a warm feeling in his chest, Naoki stroked Cyclizar's head and turned to call Koraidon back. But the legendary Pokémon was nowhere to be seen. Naoki spotted Koraidon darting through a patch of colorful wildflowers, scattering butterflies in its wake. A few minutes later, it returned, clutching a bouquet of bluebells, tulips, and hyacinths. Naoki couldn't help but chuckle. It seemed Koraidon had a competitive streak, even when it came to gift-giving. Although it was a legendary Pokémon, its actions were more akin to those of an eager child. Koraidon presented the bouquet to Naoki. "Gah-ah-ah," it declared proudly. Naoki sighed good-naturedly, accepting the flowers. As he reached for the bucket, Koraidon nuzzled its head against him, seeking affection. Naoki couldn't help but laugh, patting Koraidon's head. "You're such a child," he said, shaking his head with amusement. Satisfied, Koraidon bounced away, ready to continue its exploration. "Let's go," Naoki called, and the 3 of them headed back to the house. He left the bucket in a shady spot to prevent the fish from overheating, planning to sell them to Zack later that evening. After confirming that the dumplings weren't quite done, he sat at the desk and pulled out the ledger and pen he had purchased from the general store. Keeping meticulous records of expenses and income was essential for a successful rancher. It would help him stay organized as the ranch grew and prevent him from making costly mistakes. Naoki began to record the day's transactions. Spring, year 198, day 5. Income, black truffle plus 33,000. Expenses, seeds, fishing rod, seasonings, ingredients minus 4,190. Remaining funds, 28,810. Spring, year 198, day 6. Income, fish plus. Expenses, 0. The fish hadn't been sold yet, and Naoki didn't know their value. He left a blank space, intending to fill it in later that evening after the transaction. Naoki diligently noted the estimated costs for expanding the house and repairing the Pokémon and chicken houses. This would help him track progress and maintain motivation as he worked towards these goals. Satisfied with his bookkeeping, he stood up and checked the steamer. The glutinous rice dumplings were finally ready. Enveloped in steam, they looked like plump, white babies. As Naoki peered in, their information materialized in his mind. Glutinous rice dumplings be a springtime delicacy made with glutinous rice and red bean paste, quite popular among young people. Cooking effect, limited to bug-type Pokémon. Level 2 silk enhancement, moderately increases the toughness and strength of silk. Adding ingredients with elemental properties may cause further changes in the Pokémon that consume it. Evaluation, soft and chewy, sweet and delicate, with a hint of red bean flavor. A delicious snack, limited to bug-type Pokémon. Naoki's interest was piqued. The dumplings, though identical in appearance, varied in their level of enhancement. Some were level 1, others level 2, and the best of the bunch were level 3. But what truly intrigued Naoki wasn't the bug-type Pokémon limited aspect, but the mention of ingredients with elemental properties. He couldn't recall any such ingredients in the Pokémon world, but they certainly existed in the mobile game. Ice-type berries, electric-type lemons, and so on. Could he grow them in this world? Naoki's initial skepticism was quickly replaced by a memory of a specific dish from the game, grass cake. Feeding it to the player's in-game helpers would cause them to care for crops, and these crops would then undergo mutations. Ordinary mushrooms would become armor mushrooms, regular lemons would become electric lemons, and apples would become lum apples. If he could replicate the grass cake and feed it to Pokémon, could they also gain these magical abilities? Naoki thought it was possible. However, as a programmer, not a chef, he didn't know the recipe or the ingredients for the grass cake. How does one make a cake out of grass? It seemed like something only a cartoon character could concoct. But if successful, he could potentially create dumplings with electric properties by adding electric lemons, allowing a Caterpie to produce electrified silk. The possibilities were endless. Naoki's heart raced with excitement. It seems the next step is to try and recreate the grass cake recipe. But not yet. The ranch was in its infancy, and every penny counted. With that in mind, Naoki set the dumplings aside to cool. Cyclizar eyed them curiously, while Koraidon seemed less interested. They're hot right now, Naoki warned Cyclizar. Wait until they cool down to eat them. Cyclizar, obedient as ever, waited patiently. Naoki set aside the majority of the dumplings for his Pokémon companions. For himself, he chose a single dumpling with level 3 silk enhancement. He remembered seeing Caterpie in the nearby forest and was eager to test the dumpling's effects on a bug-type Pokémon and see how much it strengthened their silk. 0 comments 0 vote. A Caterpie's determination 12. In the afternoon, Naoki rode on Koraidon's back, venturing into the back mountains. Why Koraidon instead of Cyclizar? Well, when Naoki had mentioned his destination, Koraidon had enthusiastically volunteered to take him there. Leaving Cyclizar behind to guard the ranch and protect the fish from potential thieves like Psyduck, Sneasel, or Zigzagoon, Naoki embarked on his journey with Koraidon. Riding Koraidon was a unique experience. Cyclizar felt like a small electric scooter, but Koraidon was much larger, akin to a powerful motorcycle. However, if Naoki were to compare it to a motorcycle, the future version of Koraidon, Miraidon, would be a more fitting analogy. Since this world was the one where Koraidon escaped from the Paldea crater, this must be Arven's world, Naoki mused. Which meant Professor Olam had likely perished. His thoughts drifted as Koraidon swiftly carried him into the heart of the mountains. Their goal wasn't to forage for sellable goods this time but to find a Caterpie to test the effects of his cooking. The afternoon sun filtered through the lush canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. The calls of bird Pokémon echoed through the trees. Naoki patted Koraidon's shoulder, signaling it to slow down. He scanned the surroundings, searching for signs of Caterpie among the dense foliage and tall grass. Caterpie were notoriously weak Pokémon. While Magikarp and Wimpod might be weaker, Caterpie weren't much stronger. Before evolving, their moveset was limited to Tackle, String Shot, and Bug Bite. Even after evolving into Metapod, they could only harden, leaving them defenseless against attacks. Only upon reaching their final form, Butterfree, did they truly undergo a metamorphosis, transforming from a vulnerable caterpillar into a beautiful butterfly. In the wild, these weak green caterpillars were often preyed upon by other Pokémon, Pidgeotto being one of their most common predators. To avoid detection, Caterpie usually hid in dense vegetation, relying on camouflage for survival. A rustling sound emerged from the nearby grass. Naoki dismounted from Koraidon, approaching the sound with light footsteps. The Pokémon hiding in the underbrush froze, the rustling ceasing abruptly. Naoki gently parted the leaves to reveal a green Caterpie, its body tense and trembling with fear. Bingo! Naoki's eyes lit up, but he quickly noticed that the Caterpie appeared injured. Upon closer inspection, he saw several claw marks on its body, likely inflicted by a bird Pokémon. The Caterpie, realizing it had been discovered, stared at Naoki and Koraidon with wide, terrified eyes. Naoki's heart went out to the injured creature. Luckily, he had 2 Oran berries in his backpack that could restore its strength. He held them out towards the Caterpie, but the frightened Pokémon instinctively reacted by spitting a strand of white silk. The silk wrapped around Naoki's hand, but its quality was so poor that it snapped with a gentle tug. So weak, Naoki muttered, shaking his head. He opened his hand, revealing the berries. "You can understand me, right?" he said in a soothing voice. "I don't want to hurt you. Eat these, and you'll feel better." The Caterpie hesitated, its big black eyes studying Naoki's face. Here, Naoki placed the berries on the grass in front of the Caterpie. This time, the Caterpie didn't attack. It lowered its head and began to nibble on the Oran berries. By the time it had finished both berries, the Caterpie's injuries had visibly healed. Naoki, observing the scene, knelt beside the Caterpie and asked, "Do you want to become stronger?" His tone was gentle yet laced with temptation. The Caterpie looked up at him, confused. "You're very weak right now," Naoki continued. "The silk you're so proud of is fragile against other Pokémon. You're often attacked, aren't you? Chased as prey." The Caterpie nodded slowly, its antennae drooping. Naoki pressed on, "Are you content with this life? Everyone sees you as weak. But have you ever imagined fighting back against those who see you as food? Dominating the forest, earning the respect of all Pokémon. Could that be possible?" The Caterpie was stunned. Did it want that? Oh, how it did. Everyone considered it the weakest Pokémon. Even a newborn Pidgey could easily make a meal of it. The Caterpie envisioned itself standing triumphant over a Pidgey, striking fear into the hearts of all bird Pokémon. A newfound determination ignited within it. Naoki's words had struck a chord. He reached into his bag and produced the prepared glutinous rice dumplings, placing them before the Caterpie. "Eat this," he said, "and you will become stronger." The Caterpie looked at the white orbs, then without hesitation, began to devour them. After finishing the dumplings, the Caterpie let out a satisfied burp. Outwardly, nothing seemed to have changed. Naoki thought for a moment, then asked, "Can you try spinning silk again?" The Caterpie nodded and opened its mouth, releasing a stream of white silk. This time, the amount was significantly greater than before. Even the Caterpie itself seemed surprised by the abundance of silk it had produced. Naoki gathered the strands and wrapped them around his hands, pulling with all his might. The silk stretched taut, but unlike before, it didn't break. Indeed, Naoki mused, the toughness and viscosity have increased significantly. The strength is on another level. He turned to the Caterpie. "Congratulations," he said, "you've become stronger." Having confirmed the dumplings' effectiveness, Naoki mounted Koraidon and prepared to leave. The Caterpie, though elated by its newfound strength, was quickly filled with a renewed determination. This wasn't enough. It wanted to be even stronger, so strong that no one would ever underestimate it again. And the human who had helped it achieve this. As it watched the retreating figures of Naoki and Koraidon, a sense of longing welled up within the Caterpie. It wanted to follow them, to learn more about this human and his powerful Pokémon companion. It wanted to see where this newfound strength would lead it. 1 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Keep_smiling 29. Download app now. Naming the ranch 13. At 5 in the evening, Zack arrived at the ranch in his trusty truck, right on schedule. Naoki, with the help of Koraidon and Cyclizar, was just finishing planting the last fruit tree sapling. As he watered it, Zack's booming voice came from behind him. "You did all of this? Wasn't that a bit too fast? It's been less than a day," Zack exclaimed, his eyes wide with astonishment as he took in the transformed ranch. The once overgrown fields were now cleared and meticulously organized, the soil moist from recent watering. Naoki turned around, a smile playing on his lips. This is all thanks to them, he said, gesturing towards Koraidon and Cyclizar. Zack's jaw dropped as he noticed the second Pokémon standing beside Naoki. It was a creature he had never seen before, tall, muscular, with powerful limbs and a thick tail. What in Arceus name is that? Zack exclaimed. As a seasoned truck driver who had traveled extensively across the region, Zack had encountered countless Pokémon. He was familiar with every species native to Paldea. He wasn't a Pokémon trainer, but he often enjoyed battling trainers he met on his routes, especially those who had graduated from the prestigious Naranja Academy. But this Pokémon, it was completely foreign to him. Naoki wasn't surprised by Zack's reaction. After all, besides Professor Olam, no one else had ever encountered Koraidon. After a moment's consideration, Naoki decided not to reveal Koraidon's true identity. I'm not sure where it came from, he said honestly. It showed up at the ranch last night with some injuries. Cyclizar and I helped it, and it seems to have decided to stay and help out in return. I see, Zack murmured, nodding. He observed Koraidon's demeanor and added, it seems quite fond of you. You must be destined to meet. Satisfied with the explanation, Zack turned his attention to the shipping container. Did you find any black truffles today? He asked, hoping to continue their profitable partnership. No truffles today, Naoki replied, but I did catch some fish. He stepped under the eaves, retrieved the bucket brimming with fish, and presented it to Zack. Zack squatted down, peering into the bucket. His eyes widened in surprise. Whoa, so many. For a beginner rancher, this guy's fishing skills were impressive. Let's see. Zack released his Pokémon, a trusty Kinkeldor, and instructed it to bring over a glass fish tank from the truck. Bass, carp, whiscash, finion. Wow, there are even 2 rainbow trout. Those are rare and hard to catch. You're quite the angler, aren't you? Zack exclaimed, his admiration evident. He stood up and gave Naoki a thumbs up. Fantastic haul. Naoki responded with a modest smile, slightly embarrassed by the praise. Zack pulled out his ledger and began to tally up the catch. A bass is 300 Pokédollars, a carp is 120, a rainbow trout is 1,200. The total comes to 3,680 Pokédollars. After finishing his calculations, Zack put away his ledger, took out his wallet, and handed Naoki the payment. Excellent work. I hope we can continue this successful partnership. As Naoki accepted the money, he thought to himself, it seems that fishing is a reliable source of income in the early stages, no matter what world you're in. Zack turned to leave, his next stop being other ranches and farms to collect their goods for delivery to the market and surrounding towns. But then, he paused, as if remembering something important. He turned back to Naoki and asked, by the way, have you thought of a name for this ranch? Name. Naoki was caught off guard. Zack grinned. A good name can become the ranch's signature, you know. It'll help more people hear about it. The town also holds a harvest festival each year where all the nearby ranches compete to see who grows the best crops. The winner receives a mysterious grand prize from the town. Naoki understood. He hadn't yet settled on a name for the ranch, but he was always decisive. After a few seconds of contemplation, he declared, let's call it Naoki Ranch. It was simple, straightforward, and memorable. Named after yourself. I like it. Naoki Ranch it is. Zack beamed. I look forward to the day this name is known throughout all of Paldea. Naoki chuckled, a warm feeling spreading through him. After Zack left, Naoki turned back to survey the newly organized farmland. Upon returning from the back mountain, he had noticed the soil had settled, so he and his Pokémon companions quickly planted all the crop seeds he had purchased. There were various types of seeds, and Naoki, being a stickler for order, had divided the field into neat sections based on the crop type: potatoes, turnips, radishes, spring wheat, strawberries, cabbage, cucumbers, and tomatoes. Additionally, he had bought several fruit tree saplings: oran berries, pecha berries, sherry berries, and lepa berries. These were planted in a separate area, designated as a dedicated orchard. Common berries in this world fetched low prices. For instance, oran berries only sold for 20 Pokédollars each. Naoki didn't intend to make money from them. Instead, he planned to use them to create snacks like berry cakes, berry yogurt, and berry pies for Cyclizar and Koraidon. After hours of labor, Naoki was exhausted, but a sense of accomplishment filled him as he looked over the neatly arranged fields. We planted quite a lot for our first time, he remarked, worried he might mix up the different crops. After a moment's thought, he decided to make some wooden signs to label each section, ensuring he could easily identify them. He remembered seeing a saw in the back shed, but it was getting late. He would make the signs tomorrow. Naoki stretched his sore muscles and kicked off his mud-caked boots, rinsing his face at the outdoor faucet. As he turned, he noticed Koraidon and Cyclizar, both covered in dirt from head to tail. He sighed good-naturedly. "Stay still, I'll hose you down." The two Pokémon obediently stood in place as Naoki sprayed them with the hose, washing away the grime. Once clean, they both shook themselves simultaneously, sending a shower of water droplets over Naoki. He couldn't help but chuckle. They reminded him of playful dogs, shaking off after a bath. With this amusing thought, he returned to the house, grabbed a towel, and dried off Koraidon and Cyclizar before ushering them inside. Naoki meticulously swept and mopped the wooden floors until they gleamed, ensuring no trace of dirt remained. From now on, he would be sure to change his shoes before entering the house. By this time, it was already evening. Koraidon and Cyclizar sprawled lazily on the floor, Cyclizar yawning sleepily. Koraidon glanced at its past self with a hint of amusement. The house was bathed in warm light as Naoki, clad in comfy slippers, stood at the stove, preparing dinner. He wanted to try a new recipe, but the day's labor had left him drained. He decided to keep it simple, quickly frying up a steak and assembling sandwiches with toast, lettuce, and ham. "Dinner time," he announced, setting the plates in front of the two Pokémon. He then grabbed his own sandwich and settled at the desk, pen in hand, to complete the rest of his accounting for the day. Spring, year 198, day 6. Income, fish plus 3,680. Expenses, 0. Remaining funds, 32,490. After updating the ledger and finishing his meal, Naoki flopped onto the bed with a contented sigh. Sleep, 1 comments 0 vote. A new member 14. The following morning, Naoki awoke to the sound of rain drumming against the roof. Peering out the window, he saw a gray world shrouded in a steady downpour. Well, at least I won't have to water the crops today, Naoki thought, a small smile playing on his lips. The spring rain was a welcome sight, nourishing the newly planted seeds. With the weather being what it was, Naoki decided to stay indoors, opting to rearrange the furniture and give the old house a fresh look. He moved the desk closer to the window, allowing for a wider view while reading, and positioned the bed against the corner for a sense of security. As for the cupboard, Naoki circled it, contemplating its placement. He finally decided to move it to the opposite side of the room, creating a division between the living area and the kitchen. As he and Koraidon shifted the cupboard, Naoki was surprised to discover a dusty fireplace hidden behind it. It was dark and sooty but appeared to be in working order. With time to spare, Naoki set about cleaning out the old ashes and debris. It wasn't long before the fireplace was spotless. What a nice surprise, Naoki thought, pleased with his discovery. With a functioning fireplace, he wouldn't have to worry about freezing during the winter months. For a former office worker accustomed to modern conveniences, this was a novel and exciting find. The fireplace reminded him of the fairy tales he had read as a child, heartwarming stories of mother bears knitting by the fire while their cubs played with balls of yarn. It was a cozy image, one that he now found himself longing for. Of course, a few more Pokémon would make the picture complete. A cute Eevee, a warm-hearted Vulpix, a playful Pikachu, or a cuddly Skitty would be lovely additions to the ranch. This is real life, Naoki sighed, reflecting on his previous life. If he hadn't transmigrated, he would likely be rushing through the rain to catch the subway for work. But the past was the past, and there was no use dwelling on it. The present was what mattered. Naoki shook his head, clearing away the lingering thoughts. The air in the house felt stuffy, so he opened the door, letting in a cool breeze. He settled at the desk and began flipping through the ranch encyclopedia, searching for information on spring crops, their fertilization needs, growth cycles, and expected yields. Cyclizar and Koraidon didn't disturb him as he read, instead choosing to lounge by the door, listening to the rhythmic pattern of rain. Suddenly, Koraidon perked up, its head tilting to the side. "Gah!" Naoki looked up, following Koraidon's gaze. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Gah!" Koraidon responded, pointing its head towards the open door. Naoki stood up and walked towards the door, curious about what had caught Koraidon's attention. There, huddled under the eaves, was a familiar green Caterpie, its body soaked by the rain. "Caterpie?" Naoki questioned, a sense of surprise washing over him. As if hearing his voice, the Caterpie weakly opened its eyes and looked towards him. Naoki's heart leapt. Could this be the same Caterpie he had given the glutinous rice dumplings yesterday? But, why had it followed him? Intrigued and concerned, Naoki gently picked up the Caterpie, bringing it inside. He carefully dried its tiny body with a soft cloth, then wrapped it in an old blanket. The Caterpie's eyes expressed gratitude as it nestled into the warmth. It followed me here yesterday, Naoki thought, observing the shivering Caterpie. It must have been a tough journey, with its slow speed and potential predators. But after eating the magical fruit, it could finally fight back. Naoki was impressed. While the Caterpie might not have been strong enough to defeat its attackers, its toughened silk had allowed it to restrain them. The Caterpie, witnessing its own newfound strength, felt immense gratitude towards the human who had helped it. It craved further growth, yearning to prove its worth to the world. That desire had driven it to seek out Naoki. However, afraid of being a burden, it had remained outside, braving the rain. Naoki fetched a plate of warm oran berry juice, known for its revitalizing properties, and placed it before the Caterpie. As it drank, Naoki wondered if the Caterpie, like Ash's Heracross in the anime, had been won over by his kindness and sought to become his Pokémon. After a moment's contemplation, Naoki asked tentatively, "Do you want me to be your trainer?" The Caterpie paused mid-sip, the warmth of the juice spreading through its body. It nodded vigorously. "Cater." Naoki spread his hands, "But I'm not a trainer. As you can see, I'm just a simple rancher. I don't know the first thing about training Pokémon." His knowledge of Pokémon training was purely theoretical, gleaned from watching the anime. He had no practical experience. The Caterpie's eyes drooped with sadness. "Cater." Naoki scratched his head, marveling at the creature's intelligence. It had journeyed here alone, seeking his guidance in its quest for strength. He couldn't simply ignore its plea. Naoki knew that while Caterpie were weak, their evolved form, Butterfree, was a valuable asset. They could help pollinate the ranch's crops, promoting growth and abundance. After some deliberation, Naoki spoke, "I'm not a trainer, so I can't train you in the traditional sense. But I can help you become stronger in other ways. Even so, do you still want to stay with me?" He knew that with his cooking abilities, he might one day create a dish that could enhance a Butterfree's or Caterpie's abilities. But the possibility wasn't guaranteed, hence the cautious wording. If the Caterpie agreed, he would let it stay and help out on the ranch. The Caterpie understood. It looked down at the blanket wrapped around it, then at the warm juice. This human had shown it nothing but kindness, rescuing it from the wild, and providing it with nourishment and shelter. At that moment, the Caterpie's decision was no longer solely about becoming stronger. It simply liked Naoki. With newfound resolve, the Caterpie nodded. 0 comments 0 vote. Rainy day bounty 15. The spring rain finally ceased in the evening, leaving the air heavy with moisture. Naoki glanced at the old clock on the wall. It was still 20 minutes before 5 o'clock. He decided to take Koraidon out for another fishing expedition, hoping to catch more fish for Zack and earn some extra income. Transparent droplets clung to the blades of grass, glistening in the fading light as they slowly trickled down into the damp earth. Naoki slipped on his rain boots, leaving Caterpie and Cyclizar at home. He didn't want to deal with the hassle of cleaning muddy Pokémon upon their return, so he opted to bring only Koraidon. Cyclizar watched longingly from the porch as Naoki and Koraidon set off towards the river. Koraidon, on the other hand, was overjoyed at being Naoki's sole companion for this outing, even though Cyclizar was technically its past self. Unaware of Koraidon's internal monologue, Naoki arrived at the riverbank and turned to the legendary Pokémon with a grin. "Koraidon, I'm counting on you." Rainy days often meant good fishing. The lower air pressure and reduced oxygen in the water drove fish to the surface, making them easier to catch. Koraidon understood immediately. "Gah-hi," it exclaimed, confidently patting its chest. "Leave it to me." With a determined expression, Koraidon's aura intensified. It leapt into the air, its powerful scarlet body transforming into its sprinting build form. Its head frills, resembling dragon whiskers, unfurled into wing-like appendages as it crashed into the river with a mighty roar. Boom! The impact sent a massive wave rippling through the water, creating a crater in the surface. The displaced water shot upwards, raining down in a deafening torrent. Naoki stood stunned, jaw agape, as the spectacle unfolded before his eyes. Naoki, that move, was that Koraidon's signature move, Collision Course? Naoki wondered, observing the Pokémon closely. When Koraidon returned to shore in its battle form, Naoki's suspicions were confirmed. It was indeed Collision Course. In the game, Collision Course was a super powerful move exclusive to Koraidon, boasting a base power of 100 and perfect accuracy. Its power could be further amplified when hitting an opponent's weak point. Using Collision Course to catch fish seemed a bit excessive. Naoki looked out at the river, littered with stunned fish of various sizes. They had certainly borne the brunt of Koraidon's enthusiasm. Thankfully, Koraidon seemed to have restrained its power. While the display was dramatic, the fish weren't actually harmed, merely rendered unconscious by the shockwave. Ga ga ga, Koraidon chirped, clearly pleased with itself for completing Naoki's task. It gazed at the remaining fish, eagerness shining in its eyes. Ga-ow, it asked, tilting its head. Although Naoki didn't understand the exact words, he grasped the meaning and quickly intervened. That's enough, he said firmly. A responsible rancher had to think long-term and avoid overexploiting resources. They needed to give the fish time to replenish their numbers. Naoki and Koraidon released the Magikarp and other common Pokémon they had caught, keeping only the ordinary river fish. After 10 minutes of diligent work, they had filled the bucket to the brim. Naoki was overjoyed with their bountiful catch. Carrying the bucket of fish back to the house, Naoki noticed Cyclizar still waiting expectantly under the eaves. As it caught sight of him, its eyes lit up and it rushed over, its eager demeanor reminding Naoki of a dog excitedly greeting its owner. All right, Naoki chuckled, stroking Cyclizar's head. I'll make you some grilled fish tonight. He then selected a few plump, meaty rainbow trouts from the bucket. Just as he finished, he heard the familiar sound of a truck engine starting. Looking up, he saw Zack jumping out of his vehicle, clad in rain boots. Terrible weather today, Zack complained. Rained all day. I went to several ranches and found nothing to sell. Just a few baskets of eggs and some milk. In such weather, most ranchers preferred to stay indoors, enjoying the comforts of home. Do you have anything for me? Zack asked hopefully. Naoki held up the bucket of fish. Rainy days are good for fishing, he explained with a smile. Zack's eyes widened. So many. Naoki and Koraidon exchanged a knowing glance. This is incredible, Zack exclaimed, quickly sorting and weighing the fish. The total comes to 5,210 Pokédollars. You've been busy. Here you go. He handed Naoki the payment. Thanks for your hard work. Naoki replied, pocketing the money. A light drizzle began to fall once more. Zack looked up at the sky, grabbed his bucket, and said, I better get going. It's going to pour again. All right, be safe, Naoki replied. Zack's truck disappeared into the distance, carrying its load of fresh seafood towards the market. Naoki took a deep breath, then helped Koraidon wash the mud from its body. Once clean, Koraidon instinctively shook off the water droplets, then transformed into its sprinting build form, playfully pouncing on Naoki and licking his face with affection. Caught off guard, Naoki stumbled back, sputtering, what was that for? Ga tilde, Koraidon chirped happily. Naoki chuckled and draped a towel over Koraidon, drying its fur. He then went back inside and added today's earnings to his ledger. Spring, year 198, day 7. Income, fish plus 5,210. Expenses, 0. Remaining funds, 37,700. I'm only about 10,000 Pokédollars short of repairing the Pokémon house, Naoki mused. Once that's done, I can start raising Wooloo and Miltank. But I don't know how much they cost, so this might not be enough. Perhaps I should consider building a chicken coop first. Unlike a Pokémon house, a chicken coop only costs 20,000 Pokédollars. And compared to Miltank and Wooloo, ordinary chickens were much more affordable. Hens were prolific egg layers, with a healthy hen producing an egg a day. He could sell the eggs, use them to hatch chicks or keep them for cooking. It would be a self-sustaining system, eliminating the need to buy eggs from the market. While chicken eggs couldn't compare to the rare delicacy of Chansey eggs, raising Chansey was simply beyond his means at the moment. Raising chickens seemed like a more practical and profitable venture. With his decision made, Naoki resolved to visit the carpenter's shop when the weather cleared and commission Kelly to build a chicken coop. He would officially enter the poultry business. 0 comments 0 vote. Fireside feasts and unexpected gains 16. The rain had made the house feel damp and chilly. Naoki looked at his 3 Pokémon companions. Are you hungry? He asked. Ga. Koraidon shook its head. Ga. Cyclizar followed suit. Caterpie chimed in, also shaking its head. They had been relatively inactive all day, and their lunch hadn't fully digested yet. All right, I'll cook later then, Naoki said. Before it got dark, he headed to the shed out back and got to work. With Koraidon and Cyclizar's help, he chopped some of the collected wood into firewood for the fireplace to provide warmth and combat the dampness. Next, he found some nails and wood, fashioned a makeshift workbench, and used a saw to cut the wood into planks and stakes. He then combined the pieces to create simple signs. Naoki checked the size of the signs and handed them to Cyclizar, intending to take them back to the house and paint crop names on them to label the different sections of the field. Finally, he crafted 2 more stakes and returned to the bedroom. Caterpie, can you give me some silk? Naoki asked. Cater. The Caterpie eagerly obliged, spitting out a strand of silk. Naoki wrapped it around the 2 stakes, creating a makeshift clothesline. Perfect. Now I have a place to hang my clothes. Naoki clapped his hands in satisfaction. Glancing at the clock, he realized it was already 7 in the evening. Alright, dinner time, he announced to the 3 Pokémon. Before starting to cook, Naoki added the firewood to the fireplace and lit it. The flames danced merrily, soon warming the room. Naoki removed his jacket, remaining in his shirt as he moved to the kitchen area to prepare dinner. Tonight's menu was grilled fish, specifically rainbow trout. This type of fish was known for its tender, flavorful meat, lack of fishy smell, and minimal bones, making it ideal for grilling over charcoal. Naoki prepared the fish, brushing it with a thin layer of oil and searing it in a pan until golden brown on both sides. He then added a specially prepared sauce to the slit belly and finished cooking it over the open fire. The tantalizing aroma of grilled fish soon filled the room. Koraidon and Cyclizar, who had been dozing lazily, perked up instantly, their noses twitching as they looked towards the source of the delicious smell. Naoki placed the grilled fish onto plates, the golden oil glistening on their surface. Beneath the brown skin, the tender, red flesh peeked out, its aroma mingling with the sauce to create an irresistible scent that filled the air. He glanced at the dish's information. Grilled rainbow trout beef. This delicacy is simply grilled over charcoal, retaining the fish's natural freshness. It's a dish you won't be able to resist. Cooking effect. Major life recovery, instantly restoring physical strength and energy to optimal levels. Comment. A simple yet nutritious dish, suitable for all ages. Life recovery. Naoki thought. It was equivalent to a full restore plus a bottle of PP Max. Not bad at all. He couldn't resist taking a bite. The crispy skin gave way to the tender, melt-in-your-mouth flesh. The distinct flavor was utterly delicious, leaving him wanting more. As he reached for another bite, he felt 2 intense gazes upon him. Cyclizar and Koraidon were watching him expectantly, drool pooling on the floor. Naoki chuckled and placed the remaining fish in front of them. Easy now, he chided gently, you're making a mess. Cyclizar and Koraidon eagerly devoured their meal. Naoki then turned to Caterpie, who seemed uninterested in the grilled fish. Don't you want to eat? He asked. Cater. Caterpie shook its head. Naoki realized that fish wasn't part of a Caterpie's diet. They preferred fresh leaves and juicy fruits, consuming up to 100 leaves a day. Alright then, Naoki retrieved some berries from the cupboard, carefully cutting them into small pieces to create a fruit platter for Caterpie. The Caterpie's eyes lit up as it eagerly began to munch on the fruit. As it ate, Naoki checked the information about the platter. Fruit platter C-. This delicacy is made from a variety of fruits, combining different flavors that some Pokémon find quite appealing. Cooking effect. Skill refinement. After eating, one of the Pokémon's moves will randomly change. Comment. A basic dish, easy to make, and a good choice for home or travel. Whoa. Naoki nearly choked on his own saliva. It could change a Pokémon's move. This simple fruit platter actually triggered such a special effect. Skill refinement sounded fancy, but it was a double-edged sword, a gamble on luck. In the game, when fed to a character, it would randomly alter one of their moves. The change could be positive, like increasing the move's level and power, or negative, decreasing the level and power, or even causing the character to forget the move entirely. Occasionally, it would lead to skill specialization, granting the move unique effects. In rare cases, it could even unlock a completely new move. In his previous life, the game company he worked for had been heavily criticized for this dish's unpredictable effect. Players, hoping to strengthen their characters' moves, were often dismayed to find them weakened or even forgotten. There was even a case where a player, after feeding the dish repeatedly, ended up with a character that had lost all its moves. The enraged player nearly stormed into the game developer's office with a knife. Naoki, remembering this, looked anxiously at the Caterpie, who had already consumed the fruit platter. It was too late to stop it now. After the Caterpie finished eating, Naoki asked cautiously, "Caterpie, do you feel any changes in your body? In your moves, perhaps?" Cater. The Caterpie seemed confused at first, then began to focus on its sensations. Suddenly, its eyes widened in realization. "Caterpie!" it exclaimed. It took a deep breath, its mouth forming an O shape, and then it unleashed a net of white silk. But unlike ordinary silk, this web crackled with strands of yellow electricity. Naoki gasped in astonishment. The fruit platter had taught Caterpie the move Electroweb. 2 comments 0 vote. A warm hearth 17. Electroweb. The move used electrified webbing to ensnare opponents, dealing damage and lowering their speed. The Caterpie's luck was incredible. The Caterpie itself seemed just as surprised by its newfound ability. After the experiences of the past 2 days, it had come to understand that the food it consumed played a role in its growth and development. Food could make it stronger. Eagerly, the Caterpie looked at Naoki with hopeful eyes. "Not yet," Naoki chuckled. "You can't overindulge. You need to practice and master the new move you've learned." Besides, the cooking effect of the fruit platter was unpredictable. There was no guarantee what would happen if it were consumed repeatedly. While luck had been on their side this time, the next attempt could easily backfire and cause the Caterpie to forget its moves entirely. Cater. The Caterpie understood the reasoning behind Naoki's decision. It resolved to diligently practice its newfound Electroweb, aiming to become stronger with each passing day. But before that, it wanted to express its deep gratitude to Naoki. "Caterpie." It affectionately rubbed its antennae against Naoki's arm. Naoki smiled warmly. "Go get some rest," he said. The Caterpie nodded and retreated to a corner of the room. Naoki looked down at the empty plate, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I'll have to be more careful with that dish in the future," he muttered to himself. Naoki took the warning to heart, wary of accidentally turning Cyclizar and Koraidon into mindless eating machines. After their meal of grilled fish, both Pokémon appeared thoroughly satisfied, squatting contentedly and licking their chops. Naoki chuckled at their silly expressions, warmth spreading through him. The temperature had dropped with the evening rain, leaving a chill in the air. But inside, the fireplace radiated a cozy warmth that filled the room. With full bellies and a comfortable environment, the 3 Pokémon soon began to yawn and doze off. Naoki, however, wasn't sleepy yet. He hadn't been very active during the day. He pulled a stool in front of the fireplace and started drawing the crops he had planted on the wooden signs, referring to the illustrations in the ranch encyclopedia. He worked diligently, his shadow dancing on the wall behind him, illuminated by the flickering firelight. Caterpie was already snoring softly. Cyclizar, lying beside the bed, raised its head and looked over. Seeing that Naoki hadn't joined them for sleep, it stood up and approached him. The firelight bathed Cyclizar in a warm glow as Naoki looked up. Tilda, Cyclizar yawned, then curled up beside Naoki, content to keep him company as he worked. Naoki's heart swelled with affection. He smiled and was about to continue his task when he heard the heavy footsteps of Koraidon approaching. He turned to see Koraidon lumbering over, then settling down on his other side, mirroring Cyclizar's position. Koraidon gave Cyclizar a disgruntled look. "Darn it, it beat me to it," Koraidon thought, feeling a pang of jealousy. Cyclizar, oblivious to Koraidon's inner turmoil, had already succumbed to sleep, nestled comfortably beside their trainer. Koraidon felt a wave of frustration. Its attempt to outdo Cyclizar had backfired. It sighed, resigning itself to its spot on the floor, hoping to catch a few winks before Naoki finally joined them in slumber. Koraidon sighed, resting its head on its paws as it delved into the past. It recalled the time, shortly after arriving at Naoki's ranch when it had encountered another Koraidon. At the time, it hadn't understood, but now it realized that the other Koraidon was its past self. Later, as a Cyclizar, it had fallen into a time machine and, influenced by a mysterious force, transformed into Koraidon. But the question remained, would this Cyclizar also evolve into Koraidon, just like it had? The thought made Koraidon's head spin. It couldn't comprehend how or why this had happened and it struggled to distinguish past from present. Was it Koraidon or Cyclizar? The confusion was overwhelming. It felt like a swirling vortex of stars was forming in its mind. Eventually, Koraidon gave up trying to make sense of it all. No matter what, as long as it could be with Naoki, everything would be alright. Hearing the sigh, Naoki turned to Koraidon. "Why the sudden sigh?" he asked, concerned. Was the legendary Pokémon worried about its past defeat in the territorial battle? Recalling the game's storyline, Naoki offered words of encouragement. "Don't worry, Koraidon, when you recover your full strength, you'll definitely be able to defeat that other Koraidon. Even without the secret ingredient, Naoki was confident that his cooking could help Koraidon regain its former power. Koraidon tilted its head, confused. Gah, Naoki reassured it, don't worry, we'll find a way. Crack tilde. Koraidon's spirits lifted, and in a burst of affection, it lunged forward, showering Naoki's face with a torrent of slobber. Naoki pushed it away, wiping his face with a groan. Don't lick people randomly, he scolded. Koraidon's expression immediately turned pitiful. Naoki couldn't help but chuckle. He couldn't stay mad at the adorable Pokémon for long. The following morning, the fire in the fireplace had died out, leaving a faint scent of ash in the air. The rain had stopped, and the sky was a clear, vibrant blue. Naoki stepped outside, inhaling the crisp, fresh air. He stretched his limbs, feeling revitalized and ready to start a new day. After changing into his work boots and grabbing the newly made signs, he headed to the fields. Dewdrops clung to the leaves, sparkling in the sunlight like tiny jewels. As Naoki worked, Caterpie emerged from the house and climbed a nearby tree, munching on fresh leaves while observing Naoki, Cyclizar, and Koraidon as they tended to the crops. Determined to become stronger, not only to prove its worth to those who underestimated it but also to repay Naoki's kindness, Caterpie vowed to evolve into the strongest Butterfree it could be. It would become an asset to the ranch, helping in any way it could. After a few bites of leaves, Caterpie began practicing its newly acquired electroweb, weaving intricate patterns of electrified silk in the air. Meanwhile, Naoki, accompanied by Koraidon and Cyclizar, ventured to the western side of the ranch. This area was still untamed, a chaotic mess of weeds and trees. Naoki's plan was to clear this section of land to make space for a chicken coop. He had already saved enough money for construction, all he needed were wood and stone. Within 2 days, he hoped to visit the carpenter's shop in Kasji and ask Kelly to help him build the coop, kickstarting his poultry business. 0 comments 0 vote. The unlucky trainer 18. At 5 o'clock sharp, Zack arrived for his usual pickup, but today, Naoki had nothing to sell. It seemed that Koraidon's fishing expeditions had drastically reduced the fish population in the nearby river. Naoki had only managed to catch 3 ordinary basculin. Zack, unfazed, offered words of comfort. It's normal, he reassured Naoki. Fishing is all about luck. You've been pretty lucky so far. Some folks can sit by the river all day and not catch a single thing. Naoki chuckled inwardly. He knew all about air fishing from his previous life. After selling the 3 basculin for a meager 600 Pokédollars, Naoki contemplated trying his luck at the ocean west of Kosaji. The river was practically depleted, and it would take time to recover. With the crops not yet ready for harvest, fishing was his only source of income. However, Naoki wasn't in a rush. The priority was to finish the chicken coop. After rinsing himself and his Pokémon companions under the faucet, Naoki returned to the cabin and began preparing dinner. With the sea base gone, all that remained were some smoked sausage and ham, common staples from the market. They were non-perishable and ideal for situations without refrigeration. Unfortunately, sandwiches made with smoked sausage and ham wouldn't trigger any special effects. But Koraidon and Cyclizar still ate their meals with gusto. Naoki was reminded of the old saying, a dog doesn't care if its owner is poor. In this world, Pokémon were like loyal dogs, never judging their trainers based on wealth. But Pokémon were more than just pets. They lived alongside humans, forming deep bonds. With their emotions and intelligence, Naoki felt it was more fitting to consider them family. As for Caterpie, Naoki knew it had been diligently practicing its new move in the forest all day, taking breaks to munch on leaves whenever it got tired. It hadn't returned for dinner, likely still full from its leafy feast. Naoki checked on it and found it asleep on a large tree in the pasture. It seemed the Caterpie preferred the outdoors to the confines of the house. After dinner, exhausted from the day's work, Naoki decided to retire early. Meanwhile, in the back mountains, a 10-year-old boy with blonde hair crawled out of a ditch, covered in mud. His orange academy uniform was soiled and damp, clinging to his skin with rotting leaves. The boy, Carter, a freshman at the academy, had been on a school-sponsored outdoor excursion when he'd gotten lost 2 days ago. He had hoped to find a town or settlement, but the relentless rain had forced him to take shelter in a cave. After the rain stopped, he attempted to continue his journey, only to fall into the ditch. Not only were his clothes ruined, but he had also scraped his leg. His food supplies were depleted, and he leaned against a tree, hunger gnawing at his stomach. I hope the Delibird found a town nearby, Carter muttered, tears welling up in his eyes. I shouldn't have signed up for this stupid field trip. In the afternoon, Carter had released his only Pokémon, a Delibird, instructing it to scout the area from the air and locate any signs of civilization. Suddenly, a familiar cry echoed through the trees. Carter looked up, his face brightening with hope. The Delibird landed in front of him, proudly presenting a blue berry from the pouch it carried. You found food for me, Carter exclaimed, tears of gratitude streaming down his face. He hugged the Delibird tightly. Thank you so much, Delibird. BB. The Pokémon squawked, struggling to breathe in Carter's tight embrace. Thankfully, Carter quickly released Delibird, took a bite of the berry, and regained his determination. All right, let's keep going. Delibird led the way as Carter followed closely behind. After an hour's walk, a solitary wooden house emerged from the darkness under the moonlight. Is that a cabin? Carter was disappointed. He had hoped for a bustling town. But at least it was a sign of human habitation, a welcome sight compared to the wilderness. Delibird nodded, confirming it had detected signs of activity there earlier. It's better than nothing, Carter reasoned, approaching the house and knocking on the door. Hello, is anyone there? Soon, footsteps approached from inside. The lights flickered on, and the door creaked open, revealing a tall, slender young man. Naoki looked at the mud-covered boy in front of him, surprise flashing across his face. Can I help you? Hello, my name is Carter, the boy introduced himself quickly. I'm a student at the Orange Academy. I got lost in the mountains. Could you tell me, is the nearest town far from here? Naoki assessed the situation. About 3 hours on foot, he replied. 3 hours. Carter's face fell. His energy was depleted, and he doubted he could make it that far. Naoki noticed the academy badge on Carter's chest and raised an eyebrow. Come inside, he offered. You're in no shape to travel. You can stay here for the night. Carter's eyes lit up with gratitude. Thank you so much. We won't stay for free, though. I'll pay for the room. Don't worry about it, Naoki assured him. It's just a small favor. He knew from the original owner's memories that hotel prices in this world weren't too expensive, the cheapest being around 200 Pokédollars per night. He stepped aside, gesturing for Carter to enter. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Carter thanked him profusely. What a kind person. He stepped inside with Delibird, taking in the cozy interior. The cabin was small but well furnished, with a single bed, a desk, a cupboard serving as a partition, and a crackling fireplace. The wooden floor was spotless, and the entire space exuded an air of warmth and cleanliness. The owner must be very tidy, Carter thought to himself. Concerned about dirtying the floor, he removed his shoes before entering, padding across the room in his socks. His eyes were drawn to the 2 Pokémon resting by the bed, a Cyclizar and a crimson-colored Pokémon he had never seen before. Though unfamiliar, his trainer's intuition told him that this Pokémon was extraordinary. 0 comments 0 vote. Caterpie vs Delibird 19. Carter's attention was drawn to Koraidon, who was now yawning lazily. Naoki noticed Carter's curious gaze and explained, Are you traveling? He assumed, based on Carter's attire, that he was a wandering trainer, much like those he had seen in the anime. Carter nodded. Yes, I am. By the way, what should I call you? Just call me Naoki, he replied. I recently took over this abandoned ranch. Naoki understood the Orange Academy's liberal arts curriculum, which encouraged students to explore the Paldea region and challenge gyms instead of attending traditional classes. All right, Mr. Naoki, thank you for your hospitality, Carter said, noticing the single bed and pulling out a sleeping bag from his backpack. He unfurled it on the floor, glancing at Koraidon from time to time. Finally, curiosity got the better of him. What kind of Pokémon is that? Naoki recalled that Koraidon's name had been given by Professor Olam, the researcher who discovered it. The name might not yet be widely known. I'm not sure, Naoki answered truthfully. I encountered it recently, and it doesn't seem to be in the Pokédex yet. Carter's eyes widened with excitement. A newly discovered Pokémon. Mr. Naoki, did you catch it? Naoki looked at Koraidon. Catch it, he repeated, unsure if that was the right term. Wow, Carter exclaimed, his voice filled with envy. You must be a very skilled trainer, Mr. Naoki. Naoki shook his head. No, I'm just a rancher. Carter looked unconvinced. The aura emanating from Koraidon was incredibly powerful. How could someone capture such a Pokémon without being a strong trainer? It was common knowledge that catching a Pokémon required defeating it in battle, proving one's strength and earning its respect. Only then would a Pokémon willingly enter a Pokéball. Naoki, unsure how to respond, glanced at the clock. It was getting late, so he decided to retire for the night. Carter, exhausted from his ordeal, gratefully crawled into his sleeping bag and quickly fell asleep. The night passed peacefully, and Carter awoke early the next morning. He glanced at the bed. Naoki was still asleep. Quietly, Carter slipped out of bed, grabbed Delibird's Pokeball, and headed outside. The morning light revealed the ranch in full detail. Neat rows of crops, freshly tilled earth, and signs marking each plot stretched out before him. The distance made it difficult to read the signs, so Carter walked closer to the fields. Turnips, potatoes, he read aloud, impressed by Naoki's meticulousness. It was clear that Naoki had put a lot of care into managing the once abandoned ranch. Inspired by the sight, Carter held up Delibird's Pokeball. We can't slack off either, Delibird. With a flash of white light, Delibird materialized in the air. Let's get some exercise before breakfast, Carter declared, brimming with energy. This was his training routine with Delibird. Every morning, they would run laps around the schoolyard before eating. BB, the bird Pokémon chirped in agreement, then took off, circling the ranch with Carter jogging below. After a few laps, they stopped to rest under a tree at the edge of the pasture. All right, let's practice your moves, Carter said. Have you mastered Icy Wind yet? BB, Delibird nodded confidently. Just then, Carter noticed a wild Caterpie perched on a branch above them. His eyes lit up. Delibird, let's battle this Caterpie. BB, the Caterpie, hearing the commotion below, looked down with a calm gaze. Wanting to battle, the Caterpie met Delibird's gaze without a hint of fear. Seeing Caterpie's readiness, Carter issued his command, Delibird, use Icy Wind. BB, a surge of icy energy gathered around Delibird as it flapped its wings, sending a blast of frigid wind towards the Caterpie on the branch. Even though ice isn't super effective against Caterpie, Delibird has been training hard. Its Icy Wind should be much stronger now. Defeating a Caterpie shouldn't be a problem, Carter thought confidently. Everyone knew Caterpie was notoriously weak, with little defense against other Pokémon besides spitting out fragile silk threads. He watched the Icy Wind attack with anticipation. However, the next moment, the Caterpie surprised him. It calmly faced the oncoming attack and swiftly spun a web of silk in front of itself. The amount of silk was astonishing, forming a seamless shield in mere seconds. The Icy Wind collided with the web, freezing it solid. But the frozen web, now shaped like an umbrella, shielded the Caterpie behind it. What? Carter exclaimed, taken aback. Before he could react, the icy web shattered, and a large net crackling with yellow electricity shot out from behind it. The Delibird, caught off guard, was hit by the electroweb. A surge of electricity coursed through its body, causing it to cry out in pain. Its eyes rolled back, and it fainted. Carter stood frozen in shock, disbelief etched on his face. If he wasn't mistaken, the move Caterpie had just used was electroweb. But how was that possible? Is this even the same Caterpie I knew? Carter wondered aloud. Just then, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned to see Naoki walking towards them. Before Carter could speak, the wild Caterpie jumped down from the tree and scurried over to Naoki's side. Carter's eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Naoki, is this Caterpie yours? Yes, Naoki nodded, glancing at the unconscious Delibird. Did you battle it just now? The state of the Delibird suggested it had been defeated by Caterpie's electroweb. Electric attacks were super effective against flying types, and the surprise factor likely played a role as well. Carter blushed, embarrassment washing over him. I'm so sorry, I thought it was a wild Pokémon. Naoki was about to respond when a brilliant white light enveloped the Caterpie. Its body began to transform rapidly. The once soft body hardened, its numerous legs disappearing, replaced by a smooth, crescent-shaped form. A green bump appeared on its back, and its black eyes half closed. As the light faded, the Caterpie was gone, replaced by a brand new Metapod. Carter's jaw dropped. It evolved. Naoki smiled. I suppose you helped it achieve its evolution. No, I can't take credit for that, Carter stammered, still in shock. Naoki picked up Metapod and began walking back to the cabin. Let's head back inside. Your Delibird needs some attention. Carter followed, his mind racing with questions. Naoki looked down at Metapod and said, Congratulations on your evolution. Metapod, unable to speak or move much in this stage, simply blinked its eyes in acknowledgement. In the wild, caterpies typically sought out a safe location before evolving, hanging themselves from a branch with their silk. This caterpie, however, had instinctively sought Naoki's protection, trusting him to provide a safe haven for its transformation. Naoki, understanding this, asked before placing Metapod down, "Would you like to stay inside or outside? If you want to stay outside, just blink once." Metapod blinked slowly. Naoki nodded. "All right, I'll make a box for it later." Metapod blinked gratefully, unable to express its thanks in words. Naoki placed Metapod on a soft blanket and turned his attention to Carter's Delibird. The bird Pokémon was still unconscious, its body twitching slightly from the residual electrical energy. "Just mix sherry and pecha berries together and feed it to Delibird," Naoki instructed, retrieving the berries from his basket and preparing a mixture for the injured Pokémon. Soon, Delibird opened its eyes blearily, regaining consciousness. Carter breathed a sigh of relief, but then his thoughts returned to Caterpie's impressive display. "Mr. Naoki," he asked, still in awe, "how did you do it?" Naoki was confused. "Do what? How did you train that Caterpie to be so strong?" Carter clarified. A bug-type Caterpie defeating a ice-flying-type Delibird in one move was astonishing enough. But the fact that the Caterpie used Electroweb, a move it shouldn't naturally know, was even more unbelievable. Unless someone had specially trained it, there was no way it could have learned such a move on its own. But even then, it would be incredibly difficult, requiring a secret technique to teach a Caterpie, a Pokémon without any inherent electrical abilities, to use an electric-type move. Even a top-tier trainer might not be able to pull it off. Carter's mind raced. Naoki had captured a mysterious and powerful Pokémon and taught a weak Caterpie to use Electroweb. Mr. Naoki must be an incredibly skilled trainer. Naoki, however, simply smiled awkwardly. That was all Caterpie's own effort. It's a very special Pokémon. This wasn't entirely untrue. Besides feeding Caterpie, Naoki hadn't provided any training. The Caterpie's growth was a result of its own determination and a bit of luck. Both hard work and fortune were necessary for a Pokémon to reach its full potential. Carter nodded knowingly, interpreting Naoki's response as a humble refusal to divulge his secret training methods. Naoki, sensing Carter's assumptions, decided to change the subject. "It's getting late," he said, rising to prepare breakfast. He kept things simple, making sandwiches with smoked sausage and tomatoes from the Messagoza market. Koraidon and Cyclizar enjoyed their meal, as did Carter and Delibird, who expressed their gratitude with happy chirps. After breakfast, Carter prepared to leave. He needed to restock his supplies in the nearest town before returning to the Orange Academy. He stood at the edge of the ranch with Delibird, waving goodbye to Naoki. "Thank you so much for your hospitality, Mr. Naoki. I won't forget your kindness. I'll come visit again with Delibird when I have the chance." Naoki nodded with a smile. "Safe travels." Carter waved enthusiastically, then turned and ran towards Messagoza. Naoki watched him go, feeling a sense of kinship with the many supporting characters Ash encountered in the anime. They would offer assistance to passing trainers, sharing stories of their journeys and Pokémon, before parting ways to continue their own lives. Shaking his head with a smile, Naoki waited until Carter was out of sight before turning back to the shed. It was time to build a home for Metapod. He used a saw to cut the wood into planks, then assembled them into an open-top wooden box, securing the pieces with nails. He lined the box with fresh leaves and placed 2 pecha berries inside for sustenance. Then, he gently placed Metapod inside and hung the box under the eaves, out of the rain. The open design allowed for ventilation and provided Metapod with a view of its surroundings. After evolving from Caterpie, Metapod no longer needed to battle to grow. Its entire pupal stage was dedicated to preparing for evolution. The hard shell protected its body as it underwent a transformation, constantly renewing its cells. When it reached a certain size, Metapod would break free from its shell, emerging as a Butterfree in its final form. Naoki looked forward to that day. He had fond childhood memories of Butterfree, thanks to Ash's Butterfree in the anime. "Grow up strong," Naoki whispered, gently touching Metapod's shell. As if sensing his encouragement, Metapod responded by activating Harden, a soft green glow enveloping its body. It had heard him. 1 comments 0 vote. Building a chicken coop 20. 2 days later, the ranch was clear of trees and rocks, leaving only a carpet of uneven grass. Cyclizar frolicked in the newly opened space while Koraidon stood beside Naoki, maintaining a respectful distance from its past self. Koraidon was still unsure how to interact with its past self, so it kept its distance. Cyclizar, on the other hand, was confused by Koraidon's occasional glares and the intimidating aura it exuded. It didn't dare approach the powerful Pokémon. Naoki, oblivious to the silent tension between the two, had been consumed by the ranch work. Now, standing beneath the eaves, he surveyed the transformed landscape with satisfaction. The removal of the trees had opened up the view, allowing him to see the entire ranch from the house. Finally, Naoki exclaimed, turning to count the wood stacked behind the house. There was enough to build the chicken coop. It was time to head to town and ask Kelly the carpenter for help. He mounted Cyclizar, then addressed Koraidon, "You're in charge of guarding the house while I'm gone." Koraidon's crest fell. It shot a resentful look at Cyclizar. Naoki, sensing the tension, reached out to pat Koraidon's head. "Be good," he said soothingly. "I'll take you out next time." Koraidon perked up, its tongue lolling out in a happy grin as it licked Naoki's hand. Leaving Koraidon behind, Naoki gave Cyclizar's shoulder a gentle squeeze, and they set off for town. As the ranch and Koraidon disappeared from view, Naoki couldn't help but think, not having Pokeballs is a bit inconvenient. I can't always carry my Pokemon with me. Bringing Koraidon along would be too conspicuous, and Naoki preferred to keep a low profile. Pokeballs weren't expensive, so he decided to buy a few as a backup. He could let his Pokemon roam freely on the ranch and only use the Pokeballs when traveling. As soon as he reached the town, Naoki made his way to a store specializing in trainer supplies and purchased several standard red and white Pokeballs. Afterward, Naoki visited the market to purchase ingredients for the coming days, then headed to the carpentry shop. From afar, he spotted Kelly, the shop owner, hard at work. She wore khaki overalls and a pink shirt, her pink hair tied in a high ponytail with a headband holding back her bangs. Kelly had a classic oval face, and her years of carpentry had given her a strong, capable physique. She exuded an air of warmth and competence. She was sawing wood when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she immediately recognized the young rancher. "It's you," she greeted him with a smile. "The weather is lovely today. How's the ranch coming along?" "Almost done, Ms. Kelly," Naoki replied, then explained his reason for visiting. "I'd like to ask you to build a chicken coop for me." Kelly's eyebrows rose in surprise. "So soon? It hasn't even been a week, has it? Have you saved up enough money already?" Naoki nodded, grinning. "Cyclizar has been a great help, so we've made fast progress." Kelly glanced at Cyclizar and nodded in understanding. "I see. Give me a moment." She disappeared into the house, returning with measuring tools and an adult Cyclizar. "All right, let's go to your ranch," she said. "I need to survey the area and choose a suitable location. Once we decide where to build the chicken coop, I'll bring my team tomorrow morning to begin construction." "Okay," Naoki agreed, mounting Cyclizar and leading the way. Kelly followed on her Cyclizar. About half an hour later, they arrived at the ranch. From a distance, Naoki spotted Koraidon waiting for him at the entrance of the ranch. The legendary Pokémon had been lying on the grass, bored, but upon seeing Naoki, it jumped up excitedly. Kelly also noticed the Pokémon, a creature unlike any she had seen before. "Is that yours too?" she inquired, her curiosity piqued. Kelly wasn't a trainer, and her knowledge of Pokémon was limited to those commonly found around Kosagi and those she occasionally saw on TV. To her, Koraidon was simply an unfamiliar Pokémon, and she didn't show much surprise. "Yes, it is," Naoki replied with a smile. "Thanks to its help, I was able to gather enough materials so quickly." Kelly nodded, satisfied with the explanation. They dismounted from Cyclizar at the entrance to the ranch. Naoki gave Koraidon a reassuring pat on the head, then led Kelly on a tour of the property. Cyclizar and Koraidon followed at a leisurely pace. Kelly was impressed by what she saw. "You've done a wonderful job here," she exclaimed. A fond memory surfaced. "I came here as a child," she reminisced. "My parents brought me to experience milking Miltank. The owner back then was a very kind old man who welcomed us warmly." "That was my grandfather," Naoki replied, drawing on the original owner's memories. "My parents were ill and needed a better climate, so we moved to the Hoenn region when I was young." "I see. That explains why I didn't see you then." Kelly nodded in understanding. "Have you decided on a location for the chicken coop?" Naoki pointed to a cleared area on the western side of the farmland. "Right there." The location was close to the river, and Naoki planned to build a wooden fence around the coop so the chickens could roam freely on sunny days. Kelly surveyed the spot, nodding approvingly. "That's a great location. You could even build a water wheel by the river." You could use the power of the flowing water to grind the wheat and corn you grow, creating flour and cornmeal for yourself and your Pokémon. Naoki's eyes lit up. A water wheel? That's a great idea, Kelly chuckled. Of course, that's a separate project. When you have enough funds, I'd be happy to help you build it. Naoki smiled, appreciating Kelly's enthusiasm and expertise. With the location decided, Kelly took out her tools and began taking measurements. Once she had gathered the necessary data, she continued her tour of the ranch, guided by Naoki. After all, they would be working together closely in the future, so it was essential to understand the layout and discuss potential plans for the ranch's development. 0 comments 0 vote. Humans and Pokémon 21. They reached the farmland. Kelly squatted down, examining the soil. This soil is excellent, she remarked, perfect for growing crops. Naoki, remembering the farming game he used to play, inquired, Ms. Kelly, do you have any automatic watering machines? The kind that can be inserted into the soil and water plants automatically. He envisioned a sprinkler system like those in the game. As the ranch expanded and more crops were planted, he might not be able to manage watering everything himself. An automatic sprinkler that could water the surrounding area each morning would save him a lot of time and effort. But his hopes were quickly dashed. Kelly shook her head apologetically. I'm afraid those don't exist. Naoki sighed. Of course, games were just games. But there is another type of automated irrigation system, Kelly added. Oh, you can lay underground pipes and install faucets throughout the field, she explained. Then, using a timer, you can set it to automatically spray water at specific times. The kind of device you're thinking of, the one that magically produces water from thin air, doesn't exist, at least not yet. Naoki was intrigued. Can your shop install such a system? Absolutely, Kelly replied, a hint of pride in her voice. But it's quite expensive. A system that covers the entire farmland would cost around 30,000 to 40,000 Pokédollars. The pipes, pumps, and timer are relatively affordable individually, but the cost adds up quickly when you need a large quantity. Naoki understood. While 30,000 to 40,000 Pokédollars wasn't an exorbitant amount, it was beyond his current budget. As if sensing his financial constraints, Kelly offered an alternative. Of course, there's another way to water your crops. How? Naoki asked, curious. Kelly smiled. Water-type Pokémon. They can use their water-type moves to help with irrigation. In the city, some wild Pokémon work alongside humans, she continued. Pelipper works as a transporter, Machoke works in construction, Machamp helps with moving. You've probably seen them, right? Naoki hadn't, but the original owner had. He nodded. Pokémon have simple needs, Kelly explained. As long as we provide them with food and shelter, they're willing to help us. This cooperation is one of the reasons why the relationship between humans and Pokémon has become so harmonious over the years. Pokémon no longer had to struggle to find food or compete with others for berries. They had shelter from the elements and a sense of purpose. What more could a Pokémon ask for? This method of watering was certainly more cost-effective than an automated system. All it takes is a berry, a bottle of milk, and a little food to get a free and obedient Pokémon. Naoki marveled. The idea sparked a thought in his mind. Could he potentially hire hundreds of Pokémon to help run the ranch in the future, while he relaxed on the sofa and watched the money roll in? What a capitalistic dream. He quickly shook his head, dispelling the thought. Wouldn't people abuse this system and force Pokémon to work? He asked Kelly, his brow furrowed with concern. Kelly responded thoughtfully, it depends on the person. If they treat Pokémon as mere tools, the Pokémon will sense it and become unhappy, refusing to work or even retaliating against their employer. If someone tries to force Pokémon to work through violence, well, that's strictly forbidden by the League. Officer Jenny would be on the case immediately. But if a person treats Pokémon as partners, friends, or family, working and living alongside them, then even the toughest jobs would be completed with enthusiasm and cooperation. Naoki nodded, absorbing her words. Kelly continued their tour of the ranch. It was mostly empty, save for the farmland and a small cave behind the house. The cave was cool, dark, and damp, a perfect spot to escape the summer heat. Kelly stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space. This would be a great place to grow mushrooms, she exclaimed. Naoki had been thinking the same thing. As it happens, I have a mushroom cultivation kit, Kelly continued. If you place it in a damp, dark environment, you can harvest fresh, edible mushrooms every day. Would you be interested? It's not expensive, only 5,000 Pokédollars. 5,000 Pokédollars. The price was indeed reasonable. If he could grow his own mushrooms, he wouldn't have to travel into town to buy them. Naoki nodded eagerly. He would buy it. Kelly smiled. All right, I'll bring it with me tomorrow when I come with the construction team. Thank you, Naoki replied. Kelly nodded and, seeing that it was getting late, bid Naoki farewell and rode her cyclizer back to town. The next morning, Naoki was preparing breakfast when he heard the rumbling of a truck engine outside. He stepped out to see a truck laden with tools parked in front of the ranch. Kelly hopped out, followed by her cyclizer and a construction crew. Good morning, Naoki, Kelly greeted him. Good morning, Ms. Kelly, Naoki replied with a smile. We're ready to start construction today, Kelly said. It should take about 3 days. Feel free to leave it to us. Will do. Despite her assurance, Naoki couldn't help but be curious. He grabbed a sandwich, joined Corridon and cyclizer under the eaves, and watched the construction team get to work. Under Kelly's direction, construction workers unloaded the wood and stone Naoki had prepared. Kelly then carried several wooden boxes filled with soil to the cave behind the house. These are the mushroom cultivation kits, she explained. Just place them in the cave, and mushrooms will grow on their own. I'll get these set up first. Thank you, Naoki replied. Kelly smiled, and once the boxes were in place, she rejoined her team. Some workers used saws and pickaxes to shape the wood and stone, while others mixed a cement-like substance. Kelly marked out the area for the chicken coop with measuring tools and white powder. With the crops growing steadily and little else to do on the ranch, Naoki decided to pass the time by fishing at the river while observing the construction. Corridon, seeing him with the fishing rod, eagerly wanted to use collision course again, but Naoki quickly stopped him. Corridon looked at him, puzzled. Don't worry, Naoki explained, I'm just fishing for fun this time. He would have plenty to do once the chicken coop was finished. 2 comments 0 vote. Culinary experiments 22. While Kelly worked on the chicken coop, Naoki decided to experiment with some unique cooking methods. He wanted to try recreating the grass cake from the game, a dish said to magically alter the quality of crops. But could grass really be used for cooking? Naoki stood in the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and gathered his ingredients, the fresh green grass that Corridon and cyclizer had collected, some washed stones, and a piece of iron with a metallic sheen. He knew that Pokémon had diverse diets, with some eating meat, eggs, milk, and vegetables like humans, while others consumed grass, rocks, metal, emotions, or even souls. He was determined to give it a try. Limited by his kitchen tools, he couldn't make an actual cake out of grass. However, he could still experiment with different cooking methods using the same ingredients. The early spring grass was vibrant and fresh. He washed it thoroughly, removing any dirt and roots, then placed it in a pot to steam. If I were a grass-type Pokémon, Naoki mused, I'd probably prefer fresher grass. He reasoned that the grass shouldn't be steamed for too long, lest it become too soft or lose its moisture. He carefully timed the steaming process, and after 5 minutes, he donned oven mitts and removed the pot. The steamed grass lay glistening on a white porcelain plate. Naoki peered at the information that appeared in his mind. Steamed grass D-A low-level dish that locks in the grass's moisture and flavor, enhancing its taste and making it more appealing to some herbivorous Pokémon. Cooking effect. Slightly increases the chance of a grass-type Pokémon learning a grass-type move. Comment. Food that humans can't eat can be a delicacy for Pokémon. Your bold experiment will set a new precedent in the Pokémon world. One day, your magical food will reach the ears of all Pokémon, and they'll go crazy for it. Keep trying your best to create dishes that make Pokémon happy. Naoki stared at the message in disbelief. Naoki tore his gaze away from the nonsensical comments section and looked at the steamed grass on the plate with a mixture of shock and elation. He had hoped for this outcome, but seeing it in reality still left him stunned. Cooking with grass was indeed possible. And it wasn't even the lowest grade, F. If grass worked, could he do the same with stones and iron? A daring idea sparked in Naoki's mind. He focused on the gleaming piece of iron and decided to try a different cooking method. He heated oil in a pan, added the iron block once the oil was hot, and then tossed in various seasonings, mainly chili peppers. When the iron was coated in a fiery red chili oil, he swiftly transferred it to a plate. The information for the dish materialized before his eyes. Spicy iron nugget D-A low-level dish. Due to its hard texture and spicy flavor, most Pokémon won't eat it. However, certain Pokémon might have a particular liking for it. Cooking effect. Slightly increases the user's control over fire and steel-type moves. Additional effect. Feeding this to Heatran will slightly increase its friendliness. Evaluation. At no %, an amp. What kind of evaluation is that? Naoki wondered, but seeing the effects listed above, he felt a sense of vindication. Just like grass, metal could indeed be used in cooking. Perhaps even the ordinary stones found on the roadside could work. After all, Pokémon like Onix and Rhyhorn thrived on rocks. But what surprised Naoki the most was the additional effect of the spicy iron nugget, increasing Heatran's friendliness. Heatran was a legendary Pokémon from the Sinnoh region, linked to ancient myths. According to legend, the creator god Arceus had created the world and, to provide it with material and spiritual foundations, created Dialga, the Pokémon that controls time, Palkia, the Pokémon that controls space, and the three lake guardians, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azulf, who resided in another dimension, bringing emotions, wisdom, and willpower to the world. Heatran was born during this process. In ancient times, when Dialga and Palkia clashed, fragments of their power fell to earth, becoming the adamant ore. But Heatran should be in the Sinnoh region, right? Naoki pondered, deep in thought. According to the game, Heatran could also be found in the Hoenn region, in addition to Sinnoh. But traveling to either region and even pinpointing Heatran's exact location, was impossible for Naoki at the moment. With a tinge of regret, he glanced at the spicy iron nugget. He turned and offered it to Koraidon and Cyclizar, teasing, "Want to try this?" Both Pokémon looked at the chili-covered iron, grimaced, and shook their heads in unison. For once, they were in complete agreement. Naoki chuckled and tossed the stones and grass into the bin. These unique dishes wouldn't be of use anytime soon. But if he ever had the chance, he would definitely visit the Sinnoh region. Heatran, the fire-steel-type legendary Pokémon, was a prize worth pursuing. Although considered a lesser legendary, Naoki, a former gamer, found himself slipping into a familiar pattern of collecting rare creatures. The idea of filling his ranch with adorable, fluffy, and rare Pokémon from all over the world was incredibly appealing. He could picture himself tending to his farm, surrounded by a menagerie of Pokémon companions. He. Suddenly, Naoki realized he was being watched. Koraidon and Cyclizar were staring at him with puzzled expressions. He cleared his throat, suppressing a goofy grin, and patted their heads. All right, he said, heading outside towards Kelly, who was busy with the chicken coop construction. Ms. Kelly, he began, his eyes sparkling with hope, do you know where I might find Pokémon like Eevee, Vulpix, Pikachu, Meowth, Pachirisu, or Skitty? With the crops still growing and some free time on his hands, Naoki wanted to catch a few new companions. While Koraidon and Cyclizar were adorable in their own right, they were a bit too large for cuddling. He longed for some smaller, fluffier Pokémon to keep him company. He imagined cozy evenings by the fireplace, Koraidon and Cyclizar sprawled out beside him, while Eevee, Vulpix, Meowth, and other cuddly creatures snuggled on his lap, at the foot of the bed, on his pillow, and in his arms. That was a life he wouldn't trade for anything. 0 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Keep_smiling 29. Download app now. The Co-op 23. Eevee, Vulpix, and Pikachu. Kelly pondered for a moment, then shook her head. I'm afraid I haven't seen those around here. The forest near my shop is mostly inhabited by Pokémon like Spinarak, Kricketot, and Fletchling. Alright, Naoki replied, a bit disappointed. But he knew that these things couldn't be rushed. As long as he ventured out more often, he was bound to encounter those Pokémon someday. Time flew by, and 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. Today was the day the chicken coop was completed. Naoki stood before the small wooden and stone structure, peering inside. The co-op wasn't large. The floor was covered in a layer of yellowed grass mixed with soil, compacted by a specialized machine into a sturdy surface. On the left side of the co-op was a row of feeding troughs and a water trough for the chickens to quench their thirst. Beside the troughs was a grazing area, connected to a silo outside. Kelly had generously included the silo as a bonus. During construction, it stood tall and proud, constructed of red bricks and stone, a prominent feature on the ranch. In the corner of the coop, there was a large pile of hay and a pitchfork, alongside a special, round nesting area enclosed by wooden boards. What's that? Naoki asked, gesturing towards the nesting area. The construction work was complete, and the workers were loading their tools and the compactor into the truck. Kelly remained behind to explain the features of the chicken coop to Naoki. That's the brooding area, also called an incubator, she said. When you place eggs there, the hens will naturally go in to incubate them. After a while, chicks will hatch. If you don't want to buy every hen from town, hatching them yourself is a good option. I see. Naoki nodded, impressed by the thoughtful design. Kelly stepped inside the coop and continued her explanation. Every morning, you'll need to fill these troughs with feed from the silo and make sure the water trough is full. The chickens will take care of the rest. Remember, it's better to overfeed them than underfeed them. If the chickens aren't well fed, they won't be happy, and that will affect the quality of their eggs. Also, on sunny days, you can let them out to graze, but be sure to fence off the area. You don't want them running off. Naoki nodded, absorbing the information. A wooden fence. He could build one himself, but he had no experience. Kelly seemed to read his mind. I just finished making a new batch of wooden fences at my shop, she offered. If you'd like, I could help you fence off the area around the chicken coop. Naoki's eyes widened. How much would that cost? Kelly smiled. Not much, just 1,500 Pokédollars. Naoki breathed a sigh of relief. The price was reasonable. He hadn't been fishing much lately, and with the cost of the chicken coop, he was down to about 16,000 Pokédollars. If the fence had been too expensive, he would have had to reconsider. But 1,500 was manageable. He agreed without hesitation, paying Kelly on the spot. She waved her hand, and the two machoke from her crew began unloading the wooden fence panels from the truck. You were prepared for this, weren't you? Naoki remarked with a chuckle. Kelly laughed softly. I had a feeling you'd say yes. Naoki shook his head, amused. Kelly took a hammer from the old carpenter and, with Cyclizer's assistance, began to enclose the chicken coop with the wooden fence. With the last fence post hammered into the ground, Kelly pointed to the area opposite the chicken coop. You could build a water wheel there, she suggested. It would allow you to grind flour and make your own chicken feed. It's not too expensive, only 15,000 Pokédollars. We can even help you source the materials and equipment. Naoki was taken aback. Kelly's foresight and attention to detail were impressive. He was at a loss for words. Kelly, seeing his surprise, flashed a shrewd smile. When you're ready, just come by the shop. See you later. With that, she climbed into her truck, and Cyclizer, who had apparently learned to drive, drove them away from the ranch. As the truck disappeared, Naoki turned back to admire the newly constructed chicken coop. It was time to start his poultry-raising venture. That afternoon, Naoki left Cyclizer at home and rode Koraidon to Kosaji, fulfilling his promise to the legendary Pokémon. Koraidon was so thrilled that it practically flew along the narrow country road, much faster than Cyclizer. Within 10 minutes, they reached Kosaji. Koraidon shifted into its walking form and followed Naoki through the streets. Occasionally, they would encounter trainers with their Pokémon, but no one seemed overly surprised by the sight of Naoki riding a Koraidon. They merely cast curious glances at the unfamiliar Pokémon. Naoki, feigning ignorance, made his way to the local ranch. Although called a ranch, it didn't focus on breeding. Instead, it mainly sold common farm animals and Pokémon. Since this type of trade was different from the black market, the Alliance permitted it. The ranch was called the Happy Ranch, its sign adorned with a grinning Miltank. Naoki and Koraidon entered the shop, where a kind-faced, gray-haired old man wearing reading glasses was absorbed in a newspaper. Startled by Koraidon's imposing figure, the old man gasped, clutching his chest. Oh my, you gave me a fright. I thought a wild Pokémon had broken in. Are you here to buy some farm animals? How did you know? Naoki asked, surprised. The old man puffed up his chest proudly. Mayor told me a new rancher had moved in. I had a hunch it might be you. Naoki nodded. That's right. Haha. The old man chuckled. Looks like I was right. He folded the newspaper and stood up, gesturing towards the back of the shop. Well then, follow me to the ranch out back. Let's see what kind of animals and Pokémon you need. 0 comments 0 vote. Alcremie and Smoliv 24. Stepping through the back door, they entered a spacious area enclosed by glass walls. It resembled the backyard of Professor Oak's laboratory in the anime, complete with a meandering river, lush grass, shady trees, a cozy cave, and a tranquil lake. Several Pokémon roamed freely, playing in the grass or relaxing in the shade. Naoki's eyes scanned the scene, silently identifying each one: Miltank, Wooloo, Fletchling, Rollicoli, Carkle, and Vanillite. These were all Pokémon suitable for raising on a ranch. The kind-faced old man, his back slightly hunched, led the way, introducing Naoki to the various Pokémon and animals on Happy Ranch. I raised these youngsters myself, he said proudly. They're all healthy and have excellent temperaments. They're just waiting for a new home on a loving ranch. Indeed, the playful Pokémon looked at Naoki with curiosity as he followed the old man. Naoki's eyes were drawn to a group of Rollicoli clustered around a carkle. Can Knackley be raised? He asked, surprised. Of course, the old man replied with a smile. Don't underestimate them. In ancient times, they were very important Pokémon. For people living on this land, these little ones were indispensable. Naoki recalled Knackley's unique properties and asked, because they can produce salt. Exactly. The old man nodded. Their bodies are made of precious rock salt. As they walk, their bodies wear down, leaving behind salt trails. You can collect this salt and get a valuable supply of rock salt. Don't worry, this doesn't harm them. Their bodies can regenerate new salt at will. When they evolve into Knacklestack and Gargonicle, the salt becomes even more nutritious, rich in minerals. Just sprinkle the salt from a Gargonicle on an injured Pokémon, and no matter how severe the injury, it will heal. The old man exclaimed, and dishes made with this salt are even more delicious, fetching a higher price than even Moo milk. Intrigued, Naoki inquired about the price of a Knackley. One Knackley costs 10,000 Pokédollars, the old man replied. 10,000. It sounded steep, but Naoki quickly calculated the potential value of a Knackley. With one, he would never need to buy salt again. He could use it for his own cooking, sell the excess for a profit, and even use the salt for healing injured Pokémon. It was a worthwhile investment. However, for Naoki, who was still financially constrained, the price was a bit too high at the moment. He sighed inwardly, fingering the bills in his pocket. He would have to wait until his crops were harvested. Perhaps he could try his luck in the back mountains and find some rare ingredients to sell in the meantime. But neither fishing nor foraging was a sustainable solution. In the real world, fish populations in a body of water were finite, and overfishing would deplete them unless he found new fishing spots. A map of the surrounding area materialized in Naoki's mind. To the west of the ranch, beyond Kosaji, lay the vast Palden Sea, teeming with seafood. To the north, beyond the back mountains and a dense forest, was Casaroya Lake, a haven for freshwater fish. While I wait for the crops to grow, I could ask Koraidon to take me to these places, Naoki mused, already planning his next adventure. If he remembered correctly, the rare Dratini could be found in Casaroya Lake. Dratini evolved into the powerful and intelligent Dragonite, a valuable asset to any ranch. Once his ranch was thriving, he could even expand into delivery services, allowing townspeople to order fresh milk directly from him. Once he evolves into a Dragonair and then a Dragonite, he'll be incredibly fast. I could even have him help with deliveries. Naoki thought aloud, a wide grin spreading across his face. The old man continued to lead him through the ranch, showcasing various unique Pokémon. There were the milk-producing Miltank, the fluffy Wooloo, the olive oil-yielding Smeargle, the fruit-picking Swablu, and the cream-producing Alcremie. The Alcremie, entirely made of cream, exuded a sweet, enticing aroma that promised pure delight. Naoki couldn't help but swallow several times as he approached. His reaction startled the Alcremie, who quickly hid behind a tree, trembling as if fearing it might be eaten. The old man chuckled. "Don't be afraid, little one," he soothed. "This is the new rancher in town." Reassured by the old man's words, Alcremie slowly emerged from its hiding spot. The old man smiled and explained to Naoki, Alcremie are very special Pokémon. There are currently 63 confirmed forms, each producing a different flavor of cream. This one here makes vanilla cream, but there's another that makes caramel cream. Naoki's stomach grumbled at the thought. After completing the tour, they returned to the front desk. The old man pulled out a price list from a drawer. "Let's see what kind of animals and Pokémon you'd like to buy," he said. Naoki scanned the list, noting the prices for each Pokémon. Ordinary animals. Rooster 600, Hen 800, Duck 800. Pokémon. Combi 2500, Fletchling 2500, Vanillite 2600, Swablu 3000, Wooloo 10,000, Miltank 20,000, Knackley 10,000. Feed. Chicken feed 50 serving, Moo milk 100 serving, sweet berries 100 serving, salty berries 100 serving. How much is a serving of feed? Naoki asked. About 2 kilograms, the old man replied. The feed is made from berries, salt, flour, eggs, and other ingredients. One serving should last a Pokémon about half a month. He then proceeded to explain each item in detail. Chicken feed is made from corn flour mixed with grains. One portion lasts about a month. Cow and sheep feed is simply dried grass. Miltank and Wooloo don't eat much, so one serving lasts them about half a month, the old man explained. Combi and Swablu, on the other hand, don't need you to provide food. Just give them a place to stay, and they'll find their own food. Swablu will even bring back various fruits and berries for you. Combi are different. They live in hives, and raising them requires a flower field on your ranch. Once you have a flower field, they'll collect nectar from it every day and bring it back to the hive to make honey. Naoki nodded, absorbing the information. I currently have about 14,500 Pokédollars left, he said, enough to buy 10 hens and a rooster. That had been his original plan, with the remaining money for groceries. But now, looking at the Pokémon around him, he decided to change his strategy. He would reduce the number of hens and purchase an Alcremie and a Smoliv instead. Alcremie could produce cream, which he could use to make grass cake, and Smoliv could produce olive oil, saving him money on fuel. That would leave him with 9,400 Pokédollars. Alright, I'll buy 3 hens, a rooster, 4 servings of chicken feed, and 3 servings of sweet berries. The remaining money would be saved for emergencies. So, 3 hens, a rooster, an Alcremie, and a Smoliv, Naoki confirmed. The old man smiled and nodded. Very well, I'll have someone deliver them to your ranch later today. Naoki began to explain the ranch's location, but the old man stopped him. No need, he said, I know where it is. Naoki was surprised. Oh, the old man smiled wistfully. Your grandfather and I were friends. I often visited him when he was alive. I even held you in my arms when you were a baby, though you probably don't remember. I see, Naoki replied, a warm feeling spreading through him. The old man then squatted down and rummaged under the counter, emerging with a clear glass jar. He handed the glass jar to Naoki. This is rock salt produced by a gargonicle. Take it back and try it. Naoki examined the jar, filled with fine pink salt. Pure rock salt, a top-quality seasoning produced from the fingertips of a gargonicle. Contains rich minerals and trace elements, with the magical ability to heal wounds. Gargonicle sprinkle it on injured Pokémon, and in just a moment, their injuries will be healed. Therefore, many Pokémon gather around Gargonicle to lick its mineral-rich salt. This precious seasoning is very expensive. When added to food, it grants the dish the additional effect of physical recovery. This is too expensive, Naoki protested. The old man waved his hand dismissively. Think of it as a gift to celebrate the ranch's reopening. Your grandfather and I were close friends. It's my duty to look after you in his absence. The old man's insistence left Naoki with no choice but to accept the generous gift. He thanked the old man sincerely. Naoki, was it? Your grandfather would be proud to see the ranch restored to its former glory. Keep up the good work. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Naoki nodded, then bid the old man farewell and rode Koraidon back to the ranch. A short while later, a 16-year-old girl with round cheeks, pigtails, freckles, and large, bright eyes arrived at the ranch on a tricycle laden with goods. She looked at Naoki, who was waiting for her, and asked timidly, "Are you the new rancher that Grandpa mentioned, Mr. Naoki?" Naoki nodded. "That's me." The girl, visibly relieved, parked the tricycle on the grass and clapped her hands. 2 small, adorable Pokémon emerged from a box on the back. The one on the left was a light pink Pokémon covered in sweet cream, with 2 strawberry-like appendages on its head, an Alcremie. The one on the right resembled an olive, with light green skin, a few leaves sprouting from its head, and a yellow fruit growing in the center, a Smoliv. The 2 Pokémon timidly peeked out from behind the girl, their eyes wide with apprehension. "Don't worry," the girl reassured them. "Mr. Naoki is a kind person. He'll take good care of you. Alcremie, Mie, Smo, live." The 2 little creatures remained hesitant. However, their fear seemed to be directed not at Naoki, but at the large, crimson Pokémon looming beside him, Koraidon, with its intimidating appearance. The girl was at a loss. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Naoki," she apologized. Naoki, following their gaze, understood their apprehension. He cleared his throat and decided to give Koraidon a task. "Koraidon," he said, patting its head, "go see where Cyclizar has wandered off to, and bring it back to meet its new friends." Cyclizar was happily chasing butterflies in the fields, a fact Naoki was well aware of. But he needed to remove Koraidon from the scene for the time being. Koraidon obediently turned and loped off to find Cyclizar. With the intimidating Pokémon gone, Alcremie and Smoliv visibly relaxed. Smoliv, Alcremie. The girl, realizing the source of their fear, encouraged them, go on now. Alcremie and Smoliv cautiously approached Naoki. To avoid overwhelming them, Naoki squatted down, gently stroking their heads. Welcome to Naoki Ranch, Smoliv and Alcremie, he said with a warm smile. The Pokémon, sensing his kindness, responded with happy expressions. The girl stepped forward. I'll leave them in your care, Mr. Naoki. Please take good care of them. Naoki nodded. I will. Oh, and Mr. Naoki, the girl added, my grandfather asked me to tell you that the oil Smoliv produces before evolving into Doliv is very bitter and not suitable for consumption. It only becomes delicious after evolving. This Smoliv has been with us for almost a year, so it should be close to evolving. Naoki was surprised but nodded in understanding. The girl, relieved, unloaded several boxes of feed from the tricycle and then lowered a cage containing 3 hens and a rooster. Where is the chicken coop? She asked. Naoki, after placing Alcremie and Smoliv inside the house to acclimate, stepped forward to lift the cage. Let me take that. Oh, thank you, the girl said gratefully, picking up a box of feed and following him. Once they reached the chicken coop, Naoki opened the cage, and the hens eagerly rushed out. They explored their new home, pecking at the ground and familiarizing themselves with their surroundings. The girl placed the feed box on the ground. Naoki opened it and poured the contents into the silo, which could be accessed directly from inside the house. It was a convenient setup for feeding the chickens. 0 comments 0 vote. The ranch become lively 25. Inside the coop, Naoki filled the trough with feed. The 3 hens and rooster, drawn by the smell, eagerly gathered around and began to eat. They seemed to be settling in nicely. The girl remarked, a smile on her face. Well, Mr. Naoki, I'll be going now. If you have any questions, you can call the shop. Our number is 9,573,868. Naoki blinked. I haven't had a chance to get a phone yet. The girl looked surprised. Oh, Naoki smiled. Can I just stop by the shop if I need anything? The girl nodded enthusiastically. Of course. After explaining a few more details about caring for the chickens, the girl donned a straw hat and rode her tricycle away from the ranch. Naoki stood in the chicken coop, observing the hens. While hens could lay eggs without a rooster, those eggs would be unfertilized and couldn't hatch. Only eggs laid after mating with a rooster could produce chicks. This was why Naoki had specifically purchased a rooster. The 3 hens were healthy adults, capable of laying eggs. This meant that, starting tomorrow, he could expect at least 3 eggs daily. 1 egg doesn't sell for much, Naoki thought, so the best course of action is to use all 3 for hatching. This way, by the time the crops were ready for harvest, there would be 3 new additions to the ranch. The newly built co-op was a bit messy. Naoki grabbed a pitchfork and began moving the hay that had been piled by the door into the corner. Finished with the task, he glanced down at his attire. Dressed in brown overalls and wielding a pitchfork, he truly looked the part of a farmer. He set the pitchfork aside and exited the coop, carefully closing the door behind him to prevent the hens from escaping. As he walked back to the cabin, he recalled the girl's words. I need to focus on the ranch's infrastructure as well, he realized. Things like a telephone, television, record player, and computer. A phone would allow him to connect with people in town. A television would keep him informed about news and events. A record player could provide entertainment, perhaps playing a soothing melody on rainy days when he couldn't work outside. And a computer. It would enable him to quickly search for information and even communicate with people in far-off regions like Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Alola. But based on the original owner's memories, these items were not cheap. For now, he needed to prioritize food and shelter for himself and his Pokémon. Still, he was determined to build a better future for himself and his ranch. As he approached the cabin, he saw Koraidon and Cyclizar had returned. Opposite them stood Alcremie and Smoliv, trembling with fear. Upon seeing Naoki, the 2 smaller Pokémon scurried behind him, clinging to his legs and peering out from behind him with wide eyes. Naoki was puzzled. Koraidon, he questioned. Koraidon tilted its head, confused. Gashi. It didn't understand why the 2 were so afraid. Koraidon looked down at itself, then at the docile Cyclizar beside it. Aren't we just a little different in appearance? Naoki crouched down, gently patting Alcremie and Smoliv on the head. Relax, he soothed, it won't hurt you. Rao. Koraidon nodded emphatically, reinforcing Naoki's words. Alcremie and Smoliv cautiously eyed Koraidon. Koraidon stood patiently, allowing them to assess its demeanor. After a moment, Alcremie and Smoliv exchanged glances. Alcree, SMO, perhaps it really wouldn't eat them. Seeing their hesitation, Koraidon patted its chest with a large paw in a surprisingly human-like gesture. Rao, it chirped reassuringly. The fear in Alcremie and Smoliv's eyes faded, replaced by simple, innocent smiles. Alcremie tilde, Smoliv tilde. Naoki didn't understand their words, but seeing that they were no longer terrified of Koraidon, he scooped them up, one in each arm, and carried them into the house. This is our home from now on, Naoki announced, looking around. Where would you like to live? He wanted them to choose their own spots. Alcremie and Smoliv understood. They scanned the room, assessing their options. Smoliv quickly made its decision, choosing the windowsill above Naoki's desk. It was a sunny spot with a gentle breeze, ideal for a grass-type Pokémon that relied on photosynthesis. Naoki nodded, placing Smoliv on the windowsill, then turned to Alcremie. How about you? Alcremie's eyes darted towards the cupboards in the kitchen area, a spark of excitement igniting within them. Alcree, it exclaimed, pointing with one of its sweet-tipped appendages. The cupboard? Naoki asked, raising an eyebrow. He walked over with Alcremie in his arms and opened the cupboard door, revealing the fruits and various seasonings stored inside. Alcremie hopped in on its own accord, quickly finding a small nook in the corner to hide. Alcree, this was perfect. Okay, Naoki replied, a little surprised. He had initially thought the space might be too cramped for Alcremie, but then he considered the fairy type's nature. Perhaps it preferred small, enclosed spaces for a sense of security, especially since its sweet scent often attracted attention from other Pokémon. Not bad, Naoki mused, inhaling the faint, sweet caramel aroma that wafted from Alcremie. His mouth began to water, he hadn't had a sweet treat in a long time. A sudden urge to lick Alcremie washed over him, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. After settling Alcremie in its new home, Naoki turned his attention to Smoliv. He looked at the slightly bare windowsill, a thought forming in his mind. Something was missing. Grass-type Pokémon needed soil and water, in addition to sunlight. A flower pot. Naoki remembered an empty pot in the shed behind the house. He quickly retrieved it, rinsed away the dust, and filled it with soft soil from the farmland. He placed the pot in front of Smoliv, who immediately brightened up. It hopped into the pot, burying its little feet in the soil, and then basked lazily in the sunlight. You'll like it here, Naoki said with a gentle smile, placing the pot on the windowsill and opening the window to allow a breeze to flow through.